every transaction that Liverpool City Council undertook, for instance, a sale of land, it was valued. It has to be legally valued. Has to be, by law. It has to be. So you get external valuation of it done, and then it's sold at the external valuation. That's what happens. And those 3 statutory officers that I've just informed you of have to sign that off. So I don't sign it off. I don't sign any papers off that sells a piece of land to anybody. I don't do that. Neither does this mayor or any mayor in any other parts of the country.
Radio, it's a Leggett podcast with myself, Tom Wickstead.
It's me, Andy Grant, and this week's guest is Joe Anderson. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome, mate. It's great to be with you.
Thank you very much for your time, honestly, Joe. I really appreciate this.
Yeah.
It means a lot to both of us. So
I wanted to firstly kick off the podcast with a thank you, because I don't know if you remember, you probably had dealings like this all the time, but do you remember when I was stuck in Euston train station? And you see, you might not remember. So, funny story. I was in the coffee shop opposite Euston train station, booked my train ticket on my phone, and have obviously my wallet with me with my bank card in and my disabled rail card. Booked me ticket on my phone on the train app and left my wallet in the cafe.
Remember it.
Goes over to get on the train, showing me ticket. He says, "Where's your disabled rail pass?" I said, "It's in my wallet." Looked for my wallet, couldn't find it, left it in the cafe. I said, "Shit." Ran back, got my wallet, wasn't there. So I ran back to the train station, explained. I said, "Look, there's my train ticket, it's bought, it's purchased. I've lost my wallet." He said, "You're not getting on. You can't prove you're disabled." So I lifted my leg up and said, "There's my leg. I got blown up in Afghanistan, mate. That's my train ticket. I paid for it. Would not let me on." And I made a video of it, and it went like viral. And then you randomly messaged me and said, "Mate, I'll pay for it." Yeah, he said, "Here's my number. Give me a call. I'll sort," because I had no way of getting home. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
First time I've met you and got to say thanks.
And I remember the story. I do. I remember the story. Yeah. Well, that's I think that's what we are, isn't it, Scousers? You come to each other's aid. Well,
funnily enough, I met another Scouser, my mate, who bought me my ticket. Thankfully, that's why I didn't need your help in the end. But I just wanted to start off by saying it was appreciated, so thank you.
You're welcome, mate. You're welcome.
We said for a while Tom wanted to get a politician or someone of sorts, because I personally, mate, hate politics. I'm not into it. And I know Liverpool's a city where we are very political, but for me personally, I think through being injured in Afghanistan, I've had both Labour and Tory governments fuck me over with compensation and with tribunals and various bits and bobs. I've lost faith in it. And I wanted someone to come on and talk to me about the ins and outs of it, the highs, the lows of it. So again, I appreciate you giving up your time. The one thing me and Tom want to start with is why. You were a teacher, I believe.
Well, I wasn't. I was a social worker working in a school. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question in terms of why get involved in politics and stuff. I guess, my where we are doing this recording is in the Baltic Triangle, and I was brought up here. I grew up here. Less than 5-minute walk off Park Lane there, Kent Street. I grew up in a tenement block called Kent Gardens. Difficult upbringing in a sense. My dad was an alcoholic. He was. We suffered domestic violence. We were often thrown out as kids with my mum and had to find, somewhere to stay. In them days, there was very little, accommodation for women suffering domestic violence. It's still, a shortage today, but in them days it was, even harder. I'm going back. I'm 63 now, so, I was sort of about 8, 9, 10, 11. This was going on for. But here and in this area was my sort of playground and where I grew up. And, we were talking on the way in, and I was saying to you, that used to be this, that used to be that, that used to be this. We used to have Hanson's dairies across the way there. I used to have a milk round when I was a kid. I used to, meet there at 6 o'clock in the morning and go out delivering the milk and, all of that stuff. But I actually, I went to St Vincent's School, which is Norfolk Street, which is just up the way here, facing St Vincent's Church off Park Lane. That's where I went to the infant school. And then the junior school, which is just off Pitt Street, Upper Frederick Street. Again, 5-minute walk from here. And when I went to secondary school, again, it was difficult. It was a difficult time. As I said, my dad was at the height of his drinking and stuff, what have you. And was all kinds going on. So, a lot of my time was spent trying to get money for my mum. As I said, I had, milk round, paper round, lemonade, delivery round, and school was not something that was important to me, and often didn't go. Well, most of the time didn't go. And so I left school without any qualifications. They were called CSEs in them days, not GCSEs, CSEs. And I left St Martin's Secondary Modern School with nothing at 16. I used to leave school at 15. I was the first cohort, the first year group to be called back at 16, and I hated it because I used to hate school. So it was another year I had to do. So when I left school, I got offered 2 jobs, and I took the second job at £9 a week. I only done it for a couple of months, probably around about 4 months, and then I went to training college and went away to sea. I went to the Merchant Navy, went to Gravesend in Kent and studied there for 3 months and become a deck boy, and went away to sea. And that was great. That was a fantastic learning curve to me, and it gave me an opportunity to see the world. I seen South Africa. I was in South Africa for a number of months. Yeah, and I was in Port Elizabeth, East London, Cape Town, Durban, and in them days apartheid was very much alive and kicking, and the abhorrence of that what you're seeing, people being treated like shit, living on the decks of the ship on the quayside, waiting to start work the following day in pouring rain and in baking heat as well. All of that, made me think a little bit about the world. I also went to Poland and seen, you won't remember, but there was an uprising in Poland. Poland used to be run by a military junta. And there was an uprising run by a guy called Lech Wałęsa, and it was the Solidarity movement. And when I was there in Gdynia and Gdansk and seeing the uprising and seeing the violence and stuff, again it made me think. So I started while I was away at sea reading books like Reader's Digests and reading articles and stories. And then I started reading, some magazines and journals and biographies, and I self-educated myself because, as I said, I had little schooling at all. And then, when you say about, getting interested in politics, it was because of that self-education that made me think about, things and ask questions about things. Then I started reading, quality newspapers and stuff, what have you, and trying to make sense of things.
They say travelling, don't they, is the best education you can get.
Well, yeah. Of course, and then, but it was it was in the 80s as well, sort of like the time, and there was massive recession at the time as well, and so when you come home from a ship, you were paid off, and then you had to go to what was called the pool and register again, and this is where ships would register the names and have to ask for personnel. So in other words, able seamen, stewards, cooks and stuff, they'd be put on a board, so you'd go in and look on the board and see if there was any jobs. And the jobs become more and more difficult because of the recession, unemployment, the government allowing third world ships to operate in the country. Flags of convenience meant that the British Merchant Navy was shrinking very fast, and so a lot of unemployment. And I got a job working on the Belfast ferries running out of Liverpool, the Princess Dock, where the Crown Plaza Hotel is now, facing the Liver Buildings. That used to be the berths where the Belfast ferries used to run. And so I got a job there, which was good money, good time off. And very quickly I'd got involved in the union side of things, the National Union of Seamen, and I was one of the youngest ever conveners, and also involved very much with activity within the union. And indeed, when P&O Ferries, who run the ships, then decided to undercut wages and actually want to end the ferry route, I led a sit-in. So we sat in on the ship. And that
for how long?
Yeah, for about 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yeah, about 2 weeks, yeah. We sat in on the ship.
You're going to say like 15 hours or something?
No, for 2 weeks, yeah, 2 weeks. And there was around about 240 crew off the two ships. They were moored alongside each other that we sat in. And the union were sort of collaborating with the company to get rid of us, if you like. And I led the sit-in and said no. And it was on national news and stuff, what have you. So, and then, I remained very active in the National Union of Seamen, and, met a lot of politicians, local politicians, different people. And then I was constantly, because when I was working on the Belfast ferries, it meant that, you weren't away constantly, like for 3 months, 4 months at a time. It was like sort of like 4 days on, 2 days off. And then it became a week on and a week off. People were asking me to stand, as a councillor, to get involved. And I joined the Labour Party then. And,
Are you sorry to interrupt you, Andrew. Are you looking at politics at home, not necessarily in Liverpool, but from the UK, and seeing things that potentially you think you could do better?
Well, yeah, of course, everybody, I think, in the 80s was affected by Thatcherism and the monetary policies of Thatcherism and what it was about. And of course, we had the potential of Liverpool being treated as a scapegoat, if you like, or as a pariah, but also as a test case. We famously had Geoffrey Howe, who was Thatcher's Chancellor, and a guy called Patrick Minford, who was an advisor, who was actually based at Liverpool University, I think, or one of the universities in the Northwest. It was advised there, and they were actually advising her to have a policy and introduce a policy called managed decline, and that was to allow cities like Liverpool to actually, wither on the vine and die away. That was their philosophy.
Why would they do that? Why?
Well, it's very similar in terms of what politics is about. And Andy said about the scepticism that he has and other people have about how things are and operated and what they're about. And sometimes, I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but for people who don't understand, who say, I don't want to know about politics, I feel it's some way they're to blame for how the system works and operates. I mean, we've had in Liverpool, I've been leader of the city, no longer, as people know, the mayor, because of what's happened. But I've been leader since 2010. And we've had 54% of the fund, and that's £640 million a year. Not one-off, a year, taken away from the council and what we used to spend 10 years ago. So we've lost 3,000 jobs in the city since 2010 in the council. So people, have to understand what the policy of austerity means. And no longer does this government see the role for any government in supporting people or local government. They don't see it as the, whereas, I believe in helping the weakest, and the strongest should help the weakest and help people nurture themselves and get better and develop. That's not a policy or a philosophy that they believe in. It's very much, the weak, look after themselves, and the strong get stronger. So it's how you then, address that, or what you do about that. And of course, when I seen what was happening in the 80s and with Thatcherism, and to a certain extent right into the early 90s, it persuaded me to get a little bit more involved in politics. I left the Merchant Navy. I kept getting an ulcer in my eye and had to medically be discharged from the Merchant Navy because of that, because it meant I couldn't do my job. I was an able seaman on deck, and it meant I couldn't do that. So we actually, me and the wife, run the Munro pub in Duke Street for 5 years.
Oh, I like that pub,
yeah. So it was very difficult times then, because where I grew up, the tenement blocks around that area were all decanting and leaving. So it was very, very difficult to make ends meet in the pub in the Munro. So we left there. I'd done a Labour history course at Liverpool University, studying Labour history, And then I went back to John Moores University and studied to do a social work diploma for 2 years. I had 4 kids then, so it was a real hard struggle, you know, trying to make ends meet and trying to do the written work that you had to do, the essays and all the things that you had to do. But we managed that, you know, that was after I'd left the pub. So 5 years running the pub, and then I became a social worker. And then I was asked to stand as a councillor, and I did. I was elected for Abercrombie Ward, which is called the Riverside Ward now, which is where I grew up, which it covers this area where we are now today. So it was great to get you know, involved. But I'd never ever set out to become a politician. I'd never ever set out to do the things that I did, like becoming a convener, like becoming, you know, a social worker. I didn't have any qualifications, as I said. I didn't, you know, do an apprenticeship when I was young or whatever. So, you know, the restudying was studying to do something, and then getting involved in politics was to again help the city and help the area which I'd grown up in. And that's I think my belief and thing that's driven me, if you like, is, you know, not to be somebody in politics, but to do something in politics. That's I think what I've always wanted to do. But
that's what I feel like. It's a great way of putting it. I feel like in politics at the moment, when you see on TV, there seems to be a lot of people who like the sound of their own voice, who like to be seen as that, rather than, you know, the politics for the people. Maybe it's almost a bit like a...
I think that's true, you know, and I think that is the case with a lot of people, you know, that they wanted to get involved in politics for, you know, the wrong reasons rather than the right reasons.
Sometimes it looks...
However, you know, in fairness, the press do play a big role in that. You know, the press do not give politicians, you know, rightly so sometimes, a good name, but equally, you know, they don't, you know, they'll want to sensationalise things, and they'll want to try to bring people down. We're great in this country at doing that, and I have to say, you know, in Liverpool we're very good at it as well, as beefing people up and then wanting to knock them down. And you know, politicians are easy fodder, and haven't made, you know, things easy for themselves, have they? You know, the expenses scandal and all of that type of thing that's gone on over the years has not helped. So
on that point, you briefly touched on it when you say people who essentially like me, who don't really care about politics, and you almost like saying that they're part of the problem. For someone like me, because I came off Facebook a number of years ago because I was getting into so many political arguments.
I can imagine you getting...
Yeah, it was to do with around Brexit and stuff like that, I think it was anyway, and I just stopped. But my point is that for someone living in Bootle, if I don't, my argument, and maybe you'll have something to come back with me, but if I don't vote, like, I'm obviously Labour, but if I didn't vote, nothing would actually change. Liverpool will always be a Labour stronghold. So when I say I don't care about politics, it's because Liverpool will always be Labour.
But if everybody thought like that, Andy, then nobody would vote, would they?
I understand
and we would
that.
end up with whoever it was who just wanted to run the city or run politics in a different way, probably in a more, you know, nasty way. I mean, history's littered with people being sucked in by you know, people who've you know, been able to charismatically persuade them to follow their line, because life is simple. Life isn't simple, and politics isn't simple either. You know, you've got tough choices to make, and you know, I could sit here and tell you, and obviously I'm no longer, you know, the Mayor of Liverpool, but I can tell you facts and figures that you would blow your mind, and simply you wouldn't understand, and that's something that you should do. You should understand, because, you know, Tom's just been talking about the baby. You've just had the baby. So you know what I look at it, and I've got grandkids, 7 grandkids, and the way I look at it is that what we do and how we do it is going to be things that fundamentally are either enablers for a better city, or things that will make things more difficult to become a better city. You know, I was proud of the fact that we built 17 new schools in our city, and that was after the Tory government took £350 million off us. Now that means that, you know, there's round about 14,500 kids in good quality schools. You know, your child will go to that school and stuff, whatever, and that means that, you know, we're investing in education. There's a lot of things like the housing, like, you know, helping people who are more vulnerable, supporting people to have a better life. That can only be done if you grow your economy. So you have to make tough choices, you have to make decisions, and at the end of the day, I just ask people, and look, politics is boring, there's no question of that, but it's important nevertheless, and it's one of those things.
It's totally important, and maybe I should be a bit more proactive, but I just look at it in a simplistic view. I'm from Bootle, and it's very difficult when Liverpool is such a Labour stronghold, yet we're in a Tory government, and there are Tory MPs claiming £7.50 for a porn film they watched in a hotel last night, and they're claiming that on expenses. And yeah, there's people living in Bootle in the way they're living.
Well, just imagine.
It's very difficult then to persuade me to get out and vote when that is going on.
Well, let me just give you something to ponder. If you could imagine that you had a Tory government and a Tory-run council, things would be even worse, because at the end of the day, you know, this council would not be standing up for the people, the poorest people in this city. You know, we spend around about £64 million. That's a lot of money that we spend, and it's a big chunk of people's council tax that we spend to help the poorest within the city, people who are homeless, people who would be evicted and become homeless. And it's only as a result of that spend that's stopping people from spiraling, you know, into drug dependency maybe, or the homelessness and all of those type of things. And that would end up costing us more. Now, we do that simply because we believe in supporting and helping people. You know, yet others in central government totally believe that you shouldn't do that. That the way to do that is make wages very, very low and force people to accept those conditions and those type of wages and get out there, and you shouldn't get any welfare.
More like free market, like the...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, it's only... You only have to turn the clock back a few decades in the 60s and the 50s to see how that was the case. You know, that was the case, you know, and I don't think, you know, people need to look that far back, you know. I mean, it's like a lot of things in history, you know, and I try not to be patronising or disrespectful in a way by saying to people like, you know, you two are clearly a lot younger than me, you know, but I have started, you know, I went to see I went to see Martin Luther King's house when I was in America, and I was fortunate enough to have a tour on my own in his house and stuff, and I've read, you know, a lot of his speeches and a lot of his books and seen videos and stuff, and I, you know, study what you know, what he was about and what he said and stuff, you know, and you know, warts and all, by the way, warts and all. But nevertheless, you know, when I see films and I watch films and I'm talking to my kids, I'm reminding them that was only 50 years ago.
It's mad, that, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it was, you know, the oppression, you know, apartheid and Nelson Mandela, you know, only 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It's you know, and all of these things are there, I think, if we look at them and stuff, to remind us that having a sort of, you know, and I'm not knocking your hand, I'm enjoying the conversation, but I would suggest to people that if you don't engage and involve yourself, then those type of things can and will happen again. You know, we see it now, don't we? You know,
yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I should be more, and people in general should be more. I'm just very pessimistic in the sense that, you know,
I know what you mean. I'm exactly the same as you.
It's like, yeah, whether I vote or not, there are people in Tory governments who are taking the piss, and there are people in Labour governments that when Labour were in charge who were taking the piss. And I understand where you're coming from, but I'm yet to feel a passion to want to get involved when there just seems to be so much bullshit, whether that's media run or whether politics, and I'm yet to see a politician where I'd think of him and go, you know what, yeah, I would stand next to him and I would, you know, vote for him and I would go to the streets for him. I am yet to see that. And I know what you mean. If everyone thought like me, we'd all be fucked. I get that.
Well, the other flip side to that, and is that somebody can say, well, you know, therefore you've got what you've got.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got shit, then
but you know what?
You didn't help by going out.
And I'll accept that.
Yeah.
And I will accept that, and I won't moan. And it'll be like, okay, fine. And it's such a negative view to have, but that I just think that's what's been beaten into me.
I'll tell you what
beaten out to me, I should say.
My take on that is that you know, and again I'm saying it, you know, with respect and stuff, whatever. It's a defeatist attitude.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, I personally, you know, have you know, faith. You know, I'm not shoving that down anyone's neck, but I have faith. I have great faith, and I'm a great believer in hope. You know, without hope, we'd all be lost. And you know, one of the things that I try to give people is encouragement to hope for something better and to want to change things. And you can only change things if you've got hope and belief in things being better. And I do genuinely believe, yeah, of course there's setbacks, of course there's downsides, you know. I mean, that whole argument about Europe, and, you know, we won't go into that in much detail, but the whole argument about Europe was that we were better off out of Europe. Now, for me, all my life, I've believed in the principle of no matter what colour you are, no matter what, you know, race you are, no matter what religion you are, we're all one race, we're all part of the human race, and we should be able to live together, work together, and help and support one another. And for us to walk away from Europe, but at the same time blame what is happening in this country because, you know, the fact that we haven't got enough school places or enough housing or enough investments in the NHS has got nothing to do with Frederic, who lives in Monaco, or you know, Jean-Paul, who lives in Paris. It's got nothing to do with him. It's got to do with the policies of government in our own country. And you know, at the end of the day, I think a lot of people have been, you know, kidded because Thatcher created this "I'm all right, Jack" mentality. And I'm sorry, but it exists today, now more than ever. I see it. It permeates even in the poorest communities, that people sometimes will only care and look after themselves because I'm all right. I'm not worried about my neighbour because I'm all right. I'm worried about Tommy who lives in the next street because I'm all right. And that's a worry and a concern for me. And I see it, and it's still there, and we have to change it.
Sorry, mate.
Go on. Last thing I want to say on that before, and again, I am being defeatist, but the only reason as well, and I'm not asking you to anything, but when I was blown up in Afghanistan was in 2009, both Labour and Tory governments, I've got a tribunal next month over it now, because they're unwilling to pay me the compensation I feel I deserve for being blown up. You know?
And 99% of decent people in this country and in this city agree with you.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's very difficult for me to go, oh, well, you know.
The shit system.
I still have hope,
The shit system that disgracefully forces you to do what you're doing is a system that needs to be changing, and you can only change it by being involved in it.
Yeah,
mate, the old adage about the lotto, isn't it? You're not going to win it if you're not in it.
Of course.
Yeah. No, man, I just reiterated on Andy's point. I mean, certainly I don't read any manifestos, or, you know, I always say this to my missus, like, you know, all I look at really, and maybe it's a selfish thing, maybe it comes back to that thing of you know, I mean, I suppose as a human race we look after ourselves first, don't we? And then you know, at the end of each month I get my P whatever, and I see how much tax is taken off, or I see the council tax thing that's stuck on my fridge and it's gone up 4%, and that's all. When I think of politics, it's you know, right or wrongly, I think it is a financial, what's it costing me? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And you then don't look at what you get from it.
Yeah.
And that's only natural, it's human nature, isn't it? You know, and look, at the end of the day, that sort of you know, sort of pessimistic, that negative view of politics is in some senses, you know, it's stinging me right at this minute. You know, I'm at the end. I've just had a report done that said for 11 years I've run a city council that's allowed bullying to take place, and there's been corruption taking place, and there's been all kinds of wrongdoing taking place, which is completely and totally false. And I'll fight to clear my name, but you know, I know that there's people out there, social media, you know, the slaughtering that I've had on social media, it's affected me, it's affected my family, it's affected people who are friends of mine. And you know, absolutely untruthful comments and smears within it, and inaccurate and not factual. And sometimes, you know, in politics as well, you know, coming back to the point about, you know, what you pay for, what you get, and how you look at that is in a similar way, similar to, you know, what I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to persuade people to read my response to this report, this Cala report that's been taking place in Liverpool, see for themselves the explanations and the documents that I'm providing, and judge for yourselves. You, for instance, in terms of making, you know, a decision on, you know, whether
council
the
taxes,
council tax or the tax that you pay, have to judge on what you get from that. And I agree that you know, and especially it's perverse, isn't it, that we have a situation where you know, you can pay a similar amount of council tax as somebody who's got millions of pounds, who's living in London or in parts of London, and you can pay, you know, similar amounts of council tax and yet not get the services that they get, or not live in the area that. But that's an argument for political decisions about reform and about changing things to make things better and more fair. But in the meantime, we have to pay for, you know, your streets. Like, it costs £11 million to clean your streets.
Does it really?
Absolutely,
In Liverpool, yeah.
Absolutely, it costs £11 million. It costs £11 million to run your parks. All your parks have to be cleaned.
Of course, yeah.
Or maintained. That costs £11 million. It costs us, you know, when you look at your council tax, what we collect in council tax, we collect around about £340 million in council tax a year. That's all. It costs us £250 million to run adult social care and children's social care. So that leaves 90 million left.
To run everything else.
To run everything else. Your libraries, your leisure centres, do your roads, repairs, look after other people, disabled people, people who've got needs, people who need council tax support. All of those things have to be done. Yes, we get business rates, but that's always been my policy and philosophy about growing the economy to support the poorest. But, you know, without that council tax, we wouldn't be able to do that. You'd be walking around the streets and you'd see more people in doorways, you'd see more people homeless, you'd see more people, the schools would be crumbling, you wouldn't be getting any repairs, you wouldn't be getting any new schools, the parks would be full of rats and rubbish and not getting cleansed, and the streets similarly. So, you know, that's what gets paid for, and it's published every year. Everything that's spent is published every year, and I know it's difficult, I know it's hard, but
it's those figures you just don't hear about. And you know, you look at places like the Cayman Islands, things like that, certainly don't, you know, it's dirt roads and that sort of thing, because 0% tax. There is, you know, there has to be some sort of tax. We need infrastructure, we need things like that. I think sometimes where some people maybe get, it's like they see all this money being collected from them each month, whether it's through PAYE, and they just think, what is going, like, where's all this going? You know, they're maybe struggling at home and they're seeing all this money go, you know, and so.
And absolutely, and there's a lot of people who are sort of squeezed. You know, they're caught in the middle. So you know, sometimes those that are on the lowest incomes, especially I'm talking about people in work as well, who are on the lower end of the scale, they get squeezed, they get more and more squeezed, and there's people who are at the higher end who complain a lot and moan a lot, and they, you know, they're okay, and then it's the middle end as well that are getting squeezed. You heard them called, you know, the middle income earners and stuff, whatever, who are all complaining. So, you know, there is a real debate that needs to be had about how you tax people and how you tax council tax, how you challenge, you know, how you challenge and change the system, so that, you know, a multi-millionaire living in London is paying council tax at the same rate as you are, if you like, or not paying any more. So it needs to be looked at.
I think it's a social thing. Like you saw Donald Trump when Hillary Clinton went to him, you know, let's look at your tax, and he said, I didn't pay any tax. He was like boasting about it, like, because he had a good accountant. And it's like, surely that's not the attitude you want to have in life.
And you're spot on, isn't it? And that's how, you know, the expenses scandal kicked off, wasn't it? And you know, people employing their own families to do this, do that, and the other, and all of that kicked it off as well. And so
it's one of them, you can't moan too much because it's legal, so they're just clever and how they work it. It's like a reform of how it should not be allowed to happen.
But that comes back to your point, though. If it's allowed, and we all know morally it's not right, then it shouldn't be happening.
No, of course not. No,
so. It's like it's such a difficult topic because, you know, you could say, right, all the billionaires or whatever, you tax at this rate, but all they'll do is they'll just drive down to Luton Airport, get on the private jet and fuck off to another country where it's
and that's the point about the difficult decisions that you have to make. That's that's absolutely right, and that's what they argue, and that's what happens. You know, I remember in the 80s when we famously had Phil Collins, who'd written a song about poverty and stuff, what have you. But when Labour said they were going to tax, you know, more money, he said, "That's me. I'm fucking off. I'm going to the Cayman Islands." And stuff. Everybody said, "You're hypocrites." You know? But it wasn't just him. You know, it was other people. And that, you know, I think that's about you know, I think it was Dennis Ely who once made a quote, and he said something along the lines of, the difference between tax avoidance and tax fraud is the thickness of a prison wall. And what he meant by that was that you can bend the rules and stuff, what have you, but it's close to being illegal. Yeah, you know, that's how
morally wrong it is.
If I was a billionaire and I was going to get taxed, I'd do exactly the same. Like, I'd try and put my money in like Cayman Islands or something like that. You know.
Well, and I mean, or invest it. You know, the good thing is that you know, you should be able to, you know, change the system to make sure that, you know, if people are making huge profits and stuff, whatever, you know, like, you know, Bill Gates and stuff, whatever. You know, arguably people would say, well, Bill Gates does, you know, amazing work and puts, you know, hundreds of millions a year back in. Well, okay, but he makes, you know, billions, so it's not really on the scale thing.
On that point, can I just tell you a mad fact?
Yeah, go on.
So Jeff Bezos, this is just puts into perspective the wealth, right? Jeff Bezos has just paid for a £550 million yacht, right? Obviously, he's worth maybe 168 billion or something like that. So You think 550 million for a yacht is expensive, right? So if you compare, this is like the comparison to sort of what it's like for him spending 550 million on a boat. If you earn £50,000 a year, it's equivalent of you spending £125 to buy that boat.
Wow. Fucking hell.
And there's a £60 million a year to service it, to fuel it. That's the equivalent of something like £1.75 a year. It's mad, that, isn't it?
Why does anyone need that much fucking money?
Yeah, well, that's the perspective, though, that you need to look at it, isn't it? To give it that wow, you know, wow factor, that oomph. Is that's an amazing fact and figure, but it turns your stomach, doesn't it, when you think about it, you know?
We're all at then, Joe. You've got, again, it's a great story. You know, you've painted it. It's nice how your life kind of, you've almost fell into it. When you were then on the brink of, you know, you joined the Labour Party, you're coming into this, we've got all these problems which we've just spoke about. At what point then do you kind of get the fire in your belly to think, you know what, I'm going to have a crack at running for mayor? I think I can do a job.
Well, yeah, I mean, the story of becoming a mayor is a one in its own way, really, in its own right. I became first the leader of the council in 2010. I think I was elected, I can't remember now, it was 97, 98. I became a councillor. And around about 2004, 2005, I became the leader of the Labour Party. And I had to challenge a dear friend of mine who was the leader of the Labour group of councillors, a guy called Gideon Bentovim, lovely guy. And it was one of the hardest things I had to do. I had to speak him, sit him down and say, listen, Gid, I'm going to have to challenge you because I see things different and I want to do this and I want to do that. And so we ended up having a ballot of members in the Labour Party, and I won and became the leader. And so worked then over the next 5 years to get Labour from, I think, 18 councillors up to 70 odd councillors to take control of the council. And so in 2010, I became leader of the council when Labour was elected in the city. The opportunity to have a mayor in the city came about through having discussions with government about the cuts and about how, you know, we needed to have support to actually, you know, we're so reliant as a city because of poverty and because most of our houses, and it's a point, Tom, that coming back to your council tax thing, and I'm sorry just to digress, but it's important that people understand why some decisions get made, is over 70% of our properties in the city are terraced houses, and they're the lowest council tax band. So we get less in council tax than most cities because they haven't got as many as many terraced houses.
Terrace houses, yeah.
So that's always been a problem for us. And of course, the council tax base as well for the city has always been extremely low, which meant that we weren't getting business rates in, So business rates, not enough businesses. So we weren't getting business rates in. So they were the two areas that affected us. So we were more and more dependent on government grant.
Right.
And so when the Tories came in 2010, the first thing they did was started to cut back on all grants to local government. So Liverpool was hit, what I just mentioned to you about, you know, this £600 million reduction in grants over the years, and big chunks of grant taken away from us. Round Anfield, there was terrace houses that were crumbling, Edge Lane, the Welsh Streets, the Boot Estate in Norris Green, housing that we needed money and investment. And we had £127 million given to us by the Labour government in April. In May in 2010, the Tories were elected, and in June 2010, they took all that money away from us.
So that 640 million just disappeared like that, and then
no, gradually.
So
today it's 640 million a year
right,
that we've lost, but it was gradually.
Right.
So what it's called rate support grant, and that rate support, because you're on low rates, you get this support grant. But it was taken away from us year after year after year. So that's why I always use the phrase about growing the economy to protect the poor. So we had to get our act together and start bringing investment and development into the city to grow the economy, to be able to protect people. So that's exactly what we did. So when in 2010 complaining and moaning to the Tories every single year, they set up a fund and a pot of money that they were saying that it was called city deals. So they were saying to cities, you can have a deal where we'll give you some money as long as you can match it through, for instance, sales of land and stuff, whatever, to match that funding to invest in things like your schools or whatever. So we had to agree to that. But they said, you'll get this money, 190 million at the time, but we're only going to give you it if you go down a mayoral route. So what that meant, you know, saying we had to have a mayoral election to elect the mayor. And that's what we did in 2012. So I became the first elected mayor of Liverpool. Of course, I stood again in 2016 and won that election. But in 2012, you know, that's when we had the mayor, and that was me. I was the first elected mayor. And, you know, one of the proudest things we've achieved is that economic growth. You know, we've seen the city going from, you know, people always say to me, you know, about, well, you know, you're great, Joe, especially the older people, you know, say, you're great, Joe, you brought the cruise liners back again. Well, when in 2010 we used to have 3 cruise liners a year, that's about it, coming to the Langton Dock, which is down in your neck of the woods, down in Bootle, just, you know, it's still Liverpool, but it's Langton Dock by the scrapyard. Yeah. And the ships used to come in there, and so passengers from America or Canada or China would be bathing there and looking out at the scrapyard.
Looking
on
at
the
Bootle.
docks. Yeah, looking at Bootle on the docks.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry for
so and that far away. And so when I became, we had a brand new berth at the pier head, but couldn't use it because it was European money and government money, and they said that if we were using it, it would be anti-competitive in terms of Southampton hadn't got this money and they hadn't been given this money for this bit. So I had to pay £11 million back. So we paid £11 million back. And now we've got 80 odd cruise liners coming in every year. Tourists coming into the city centre.
Even that, though, the red tape of the government saying you can't do this
absolutely
unless you have money back to
well,
open
that's
up
right.
more.
Well, that's a true story, and we had to pay.
How fucked up is that, though?
No, you're right, absolutely. As a seaport, and why shouldn't we have the right to have our own? But we had to pay that back. So that's one of many things. But
you must be proud of that, the fact that little things like that.
Well, especially being in the Merchant Navy, and I remember as a kid, in the 60s. We used to have ships that would be anchored out in the Mersey. Look, you're going to me, what's this alcod you're on about? But in the 60s, 66, 68, when I was a young lad, I used to go down the landing stage. We used to call it the landing stage because that's there was the landing stage, the pier head. And there used to be ships anchored in the river waiting to come in, passengers off one ship coming off, and then sailing, and another one would be coming in. Right. That's how busy it was. So the port was thriving. It was absolutely amazing, and you could see ships anchored off. The river was so busy. So to see it now in the way it is today gives me a great satisfaction, especially being, in the Merchant Navy from that particular ilk as well. It's great to see. So yeah, but look, many things. Sometimes, often. People say to me, about what's your best achievements and stuff. And I said, well, when we took over, despite all those cuts from the Tories, despite all those cuts, Liverpool is now round about 50-60 million pound better off a year in business rates and in council tax than we were in 2010. We've built 13,000 new houses. 4,800 new businesses have been created since 2010 to today. 4,800. So 38,000 jobs have been created since 2010 to now. Now, I'm not claiming credit for all of those. That's the private sector. That's the investment that's happened there that have been, created since then. If you look at the Langton Dock, where Bramley Moor is going to be, next to Nelson Dock, Bramley Moor, right the way through to the garden festivals, just under 5 miles of waterfront that's going to be developed. The King's Dock, the Queen's Dock, right the way through to the garden festival site. Major the going to happen in the city, and a lot of it, is owned by us. Paddington Village. When we did that deal, you asked about the, if you like, the things that led us to become a mayoral city. Well, when we did that deal, I bought some land off the government. Part of that deal, we got £190 million, but we also got some land. King's Dock, we now own that. Pall Mall, the Littlewoods building and Edge Lane, we now own those sites. I negotiated them from the government. I paid £4 million for them to get them back in our ownership. The King's Dock site alone, and Pall Mall's worth about 30 million. So and we've got control of the Littlewoods building. It's going to be a film studio and stuff. So I paid 5 million for the garden festival site. It's worth huge amounts of money. The Cunard building, £10 million for. It's now worth 30 million. I remember people giving me stick over buying Finch Farm and renting it back to Everton. We make £1.2 million profit. People don't realise we own the Pullman Hotel. The Pullman Hotel next to the exhibition centre, we own that, and we get £1.7 million profit from the beds.
So before you're buying these, are we as a council paying rent to the government?
In terms of no, for the land that we acquired from them, we weren't paying any rent, but it was just in their ownership, and nothing was happening with it, and so we negotiated it and said they had assets that we said we wanted back in our control. And so, that's what's going on. So some of the things, Paddington Village it's called Paddington Village. I don't know whether as you come off Edge Lane now, and look at Edge Lane, it's
changed a lot.
It's massively. Remember the derelict houses with the painted boards and capital culture here? Remember that?
It's crazy. It doesn't
even
look the same, does it?
Now look at it now, and there's only one section of Edge Lane is complete. There's 2 more sections to come. But if you drive down Edge Lane, as you come down, Paddington Comprehensive School used to be there, the old school. We've moved that school to Smithdown Road, brand new school. We've built them, and we've developed that site. And again, it's going to bring in a business rate of around about £27 million. When it's completed, it's in 3 phases. What you see there now is only one phase that's called the Spine. You've got Kaplan Language School, you've got the Rutherford Cancer Centre, and you've got a hotel, all massive, employment opportunities.
You know, when you've took over then that role of mayor, is that where you've identified, like you've said, then we need to develop the economy and business? Is that where you'd say then mostly it's been about getting investments into the city? That's what you've when you look back at, that was your main focus.
Absolutely. When I became the leader in 2010, a lot of complaints from businesses and developers, investors, was that Liverpool was a bit of a backwood. Liverpool was not just a backwood in terms of because it was not doing anything. It was stagnant. It was we had press headlines like our city was like a war zone. That was previously the council described it as that, and we'd been given a rating of a 1-star city. It was really dismal. It was really appalling. And I was watching the growth of Manchester, and a good friend of mine, Richard Leese, and Howard Bernstein, who was the chief executive, I used to talk to them, and businesses used to say to me, especially businesses in and around there, that you could do business with the council any time. You could talk to them, and they would say, well, you can't do that, but we can do this, or we can help you do this, and we'll work with you to do that. And it grew the economy, and that's how Manchester's transformed to what you see now.
Oh, it's incredible, isn't it? I think
that
there was a mad statistic that I had the most cranes in the whole of Europe at one point per square. Like, it was just, when you drive down that M602, you just see crane, the whole thing's...
That's what one thing, and one of the questions as well was, and what I don't understand, and I think a frustration for a lot of people, or it's a misunderstanding, is there seems to be so much money wasted, or at least time even, when it comes to, there's a mayor, there's a metro mayor, there's councillors, there's politics. There seems to be so many different roles, and how I describe it a little bit, it's a joke really, in the sense, for a military charity. So there are about 1,000 military charities, all there offering to help veterans, but they're all fighting for each other for money and for fundraising and this and that. And in the end, the only one who loses out is the injured soldier who needs help.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like sometimes.
And
with council.
I can understand that, Andy, but again, it comes back to this point about trying to understand it a little bit. Like the Metro Mayor is a position that is supposed to be around bringing the councils together to work strategically. So for instance, if I was building a school, let's just use Sefton as an example, and let's just use Bootle as an example, because I know how close they are to your heart. So if we were building a school, a brand new secondary school in Bootle, and on the edge of say Hillside School, and say you were building a school there, and Liverpool was building a school half a mile away, a brand new school, and they were both going to cost £20 million each to build, and then they were going to be in competition with one another, because the freedom for kids to go from that school to go to that school. So what you would do, or should do, with sensible heads on, is build a brand new school for both areas, and save 20 million quid. That's what you should do. So that's the concept of how a combined authority, it strategically looks at investment, in employment, in housing, in all of those things. So for instance, I personally myself look at it this way. I don't give a shit if my lad works in Wirral, as long as he's working. And I don't give a shit if someone from Wirral comes to Liverpool and works in Liverpool, as long as there's a job there for them. So, it's about working together to maximise your investment, your opportunity and your offer. Like Jaguar Land Rover is always classed as Liverpool. It's not, it's actually in Knowsley. But my son works there, and I'm proud that he's got a job working in Knowsley.
But surely that doesn't take X amount of councillors, X amount of mayors, metro mayors and politicians to understand that.
I think, for me, it is really...
I don't think most people will know the difference, what someone like MP of Walton, Dan Carden, does, to say what you've done as the Mayor of Liverpool, to what then Steve Rotherham does, to then what all the local... I
wished, obviously, and I'm not now at the minute, obviously, I wish that I was in a position where I could say to you, come in and look up the job that I do. when I was mayor, and then go and have a look at the job that Steve Rotherham does, and then go and have a look at what an MP does, and they're completely separate. You know,
so
and
do
then,
you think they're all needed? Then you've
no,
worked
absolutely,
in it.
and I've got no axe to grind one way or the other, but absolutely yes, they are needed, without a shadow of a doubt. I think in the future, there may well not be a need for a Liverpool mayor and a Metro mayor, or leaders of the councils. I think in the future, maybe in another 10 years, that there could well be a merger, so that there's not like a county council, what we used to have in the days gone by that you won't remember, but we used to have like a county council structure, and some places like Lancashire, for instance, and others have that type of structure. But it's a structure where there's more joined up working together, more cooperation and collaboration between each other, so you can save money but do things differently. I think in the future that will come.
Well, why don't we have that now, though?
Well, it's too early, and you know, there are a lot of things like Liverpool needs to manage its own schools, its parks. You can't have one central organisation or body, deciding about school admissions policies, for instance, in Sefton or in Knowsley, because it's only local people who can decide locally about what's needed, or what cycle of cleansing should you have for your parks, or what roads should take priority over other roads. That has to be done locally. It has to have retention of that local involvement. But the macro, in terms of the bigger pictures about, for instance, let's just say we had a position where Jaguar Land Rover needed to expand. If not, they're going to go to Birmingham or whatever. Then every local authority should work together to find a site that benefits Jaguar Land Rover to make sure it happens, and whether that's to help support with investment to keep those jobs here. It's that type of infrastructure, big ticket items that the combined authority should deal with. So and equally, look, the Lord Mayor is a ceremonial job. It's a ceremonial job. It's opening fates, it's opening buildings, it's that sort of thing. It's not the day-to-day running of the council, or making the decisions about investments and decisions about what investments should be made in schools or housing.
If you think then that they're all needed, do you think then, from your opinion, when you've worked alongside, whether it's Steve Rotherham or Dan Carden or all these different people who are in power at the minute or have been over the years, do they work the positions are in, not personally, but do they work as well as they should?
Yeah, I do. It's hard to for Steve to sort of show and demonstrate that big things happen as a result of not just his role, but the role of the combined authority. But it is happening because government insist that you have to have a combined authority, and you have to have a Metro Mayor, or they won't passport money down. So that is difficult for him. But look, I know him personally, and I know he does a good job. And the reality is the combined authority is doing a good job as well. And in regards to the MPs, the MPs are part of a structure. We mightn't like it, it's archaic. It's in some senses very, I would argue, dysfunctional. And I'd much rather have sort of like a regional parliament as well, where you're more accessible. But we have a structure where MPs from constituencies are representing that constituency. So there's 5 constituencies in Liverpool, and we have 5 MPs that represent Liverpool in Parliament. Now, without their voice in Parliament, you wouldn't have a voice in Parliament. We wouldn't have a voice in Parliament. So it's important to just remember that that's not to say it shouldn't change. I do believe it should. But,
is it those 5 MPs then that then rally the government, whichever government it was, Tory, who took money away, to say, look, we need this money, and then they're going, no, you can't have it? Or like, how does that conversation work?
Well, no, you're right, it is. That does happen. If you look at parliamentary debates, for instance, whether it's the local government debates and stuff, what have you, like Ian Byrne is on what's called the MCHLG, which is it's like the local government stuff, and he sits on that, and he'll argue for more money for Liverpool. He's on that select committee in Parliament, you know, Maria Eagle, Dan Carden, you know, and the others, Paula Barker, will make those claims for more money for us. Kim Johnson, another MP, they will argue and make those claims for more money, for more resources for Liverpool. Now, sometimes people don't see it or hear it because they don't watch, you know, the parliamentary channel all day, so they don't know that's the case. But they do it, and they'll argue with the government. But it comes back to, you know, in some senses, Andy's point that it doesn't matter what you say if they have control. So if you've got, you know, a thumping Conservative majority, doesn't matter what's said. It doesn't matter what I said to the Tories. They won't listen, you know, and so they never give us any more resources, and they won't listen to MPs either. And
would they then give resources? You know, we've seen it with COVID, haven't we? Like Matt Hancock, jobs for the boy, you know, like that sort of thing. Like, will they? You know, is there some way of like transparency where you can say, oh, bloody hell, they've given so much money to Chipping Norton, where it's, you know,
but sometimes you can make those points, and if it's like sometimes banging the head against a brick wall.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to give examples, for instance, where Bristol has a mayor, Marvin Rees, and Bristol collect £30 million a year more in council tax than we do, because they haven't got as many terraced houses, so they get more money than us. And yet we've got more high levels of deprivation, we've got more poverty, we've got more people living here than they, but they get more money. Now that's a system failure. Yeah. That's the failure of the system that allocates the money. In the same way, Tom, you made the point before about tax.
Yeah.
It's the failure of the system and the failure
like
of the procedures. Something from the top of the whole fucking... Yeah, and it's sometimes people don't make change because it's difficult to change. Like, we've got a formula of funding, that's the way it's allocated, of funding to local government, that's 40 years old. It was introduced by a guy called Joel Barnett. It's called the Barnett Formula. You might have now and again, when the Chancellor makes his announcements or stuff, he'll talk about the Barnett Formula. Right. It was 40 years old, and Joel Barnett, he was a Labour politician, and he wrote it on the back of a cigarette packet. Seriously, he was asked to come up with something, whatever, and he did it. And we still use that system today, and it needs changing.
And what is that? Is it based on population? Or
based on population, based on deprivation. But the governments have systematically removed deprivation from it. So even though we might, you know, we're one of the most deprived cities in the country, Liverpool, one of the most deprived cities in the country, we've been hit the hardest.
Right.
Perversely, we've been the hardest hit in cuts, even though we've got more poverty and more levels of poverty. There's still 1 in 3 kids in this city, in Liverpool. People, you know, when I talk about the growth and when I talk about the things, wonderful things that are happening, there's still 1 in 3 in some parts of our city, 1 in 4 kids living in poverty.
That's crazy.
But it's true. Those figures, you know, you go to Anfield, you go to Breckfield, you go to Speke, you go to Garston, you go to Dingle, there's kids behind closed doors that me and you don't see that are fucking struggling, that are eating packets of crisps for all day, you know, who are, you know, all huddling in one room.
It's mad to think when, you know, you're walking down, I went for a pint last night down Dale Street with my dad, and you walk into a pub and you sit there and you're having your beer, and I had a pub lunch there, and you forget sometimes, don't you, that 1 in 3
stats. That was one of the things that, you know, coming back before about my upbringing and living in poverty and my dad being an alcoholic. We used to, you know, have our lecky cut off and our gas cut off because he'd break into the meters. And you know, yet my dad was respected. My dad was respected in the community. People used to say, "Oh, hiya, Joe. You know, you're all right," because they didn't see him when he was drunk. They didn't see him as a racist, which he was. They didn't see him being violent, which he was. They didn't see that. I did. My sisters did. My 2 brothers were away at sea. They're both dead now, but they didn't see it, but we did. And so what goes on behind closed doors, people don't see. People don't get to know, and that's still, you know, something that worries the shit out of me on a daily basis. The fact that there's so many kids who are really struggling. So when we talk about, you know, educational standards in the city not being great, it's no wonder, is it? You know, if you've got kids living in poverty and you know, parents haven't got the money for school uniforms or whatever.
What chance have they got?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I used to work in London and used to walk through Belgravia and stuff like that, and obviously the gorgeous areas and things like that. And you do want, like, surely you'd think to yourself, right, that area, that does not need any more money. The streets are pristine. Like, let's put some money in places that it sounds so simple, doesn't
like
it?
Too much of a good idea.
But that's the same, isn't it? You know, when I switch on the news and I see, you know, real poverty in third world countries, and I see, you know, vaccines not being given because they can't afford them, because of, you know, the COVID, but they can't afford the vaccines because of poverty and the reliance on us. And then we see the government taking away money that we should be supporting, you know, other countries with. And it's that same hierarchical, you know, way life is that allows the poorest to remain poor and stay poor. Yeah. And no change. You know, what you've just said about walking through Belgravia or whatever,
Chelsea or any of those places.
But there's a north-south divide here in Liverpool.
Yeah.
If you go to Woolton or Chilwell, you know, and you'll see areas there that are so disconnected from the life of people in Breckfield and Anfield, you know, or Bootle
Strands,
or anywhere, and that exists here. There's a north-south divide here in this city. There's the haves and have-nots.
Mate, on that point which you're making about more personal levels, one story which I didn't know until I asked after you mentioned it when I knew you were coming on, is the role that you played with Michael Shields.
Yeah, Michael's
I think
a good lad, isn't he?
Yeah, we've had Michael on the pod, and
yeah,
I think
I didn't hear it. I apologise, I didn't hear it. But yeah, that was 5 years of my life that I, well, suppose dedicated to Michael.
I've heard some people last 24 hours, 48 hours have said some great things about you in the role that you played to help him.
Yeah, it was, and it started very much as a, sort of gut feeling about things, and you know, his auntie and his mum came and spoke to me and told me what had gone on, and you could see, you know, by talking to them how truthful it was that, you know, this kid couldn't have committed the offence he was accused of. And ironically, you know, you read some of the reports of it, and you'd even read some of the comments of the guy, it was out there in the public and stuff, whatever. It's in the book. A guy called Graham Sankey who was supposed to have carried out the assault and stuff, whatever, and what happened. And it wasn't a brick thrown; it was a brick that was smashed down on Martin Georgiev, the waiter's head. That you knew that Michael Shields couldn't have carried out that, but I spoke to his mum and his aunt, and I decided to help and stuff. And then his dad, Michael Senior, was sort of very sceptical of a politician wanting to help, like you know, Andy, not trustworthy of politicians. So, but I said I'd help, and I did, and I went to Varna. Michael was in jail in Varna, so I went to see him in prison, and he was in a prison cell with 4 other prisoners. He was a kid, couldn't speak a word of Bulgarian, was frightened shitless, absolutely frightened. And I went to see him in this prison, and it was winter, it was pouring down with rain. And if people have seen Midnight Express, then that was the conditions. That was it. You're walking through corridors, and the rain was coming through the ceilings. You know, rats. You could see rats in the courtyards. And I was taken to a room and was allowed to see him, Michael, with 2 guards there. And I spoke to him for about an hour. And I just knew when I spoke to him, you know, this kid's not done anything wrong. You know, I talked to him about what happened, where he was, what went on, and all of those things. And it, as I said, it was just very, very clear. You have a feeling inside you that tells you, you know. So I knew then that you know, I was hooked. I had to do something. This kid was totally innocent, and here he is banged up in this shithole, with people who couldn't speak his language, you know. And obviously I was worried about him. So I was there for a couple of days. I had contact with different people, met with different people over there, and then you know, come home, and then immediately sort of started the, you know, a campaign really to start to get involved with people and highlight his plight, and it took, you know, a period of 5 years. I remember talking to James Jones, who was then the Bishop of Liverpool, and you know, I spoke to a lot of people, and you know, ironically, we got more support and help from Everton Football Club than we did Liverpool Football Club at the time. But there was many things that we did. You know, we had to pay £120,000 to get Michael back to this country. We had to pay a fine, and so we had to raise that money, and that was a huge job. I had an event in the Empire Theatre with Atomic Kitten. We flew in Gloria Gaynor. I worked with a agent called Malcolm Feld, and he was an agent that had contacts and stuff, and so we got Gloria Gaynor to come over, no charge, but we just paid for her expenses, her hotels. Atomic Kitten formed The Real Thing were on. I think
Real Thing, brilliant.
Yeah, but many bands, local bands and stuff, what have you, all came together, and we raised I think it was around about £90,000. But I remember doing it, not a lot of people know, but when I did it, I had to, the wife doesn't know this, so I don't know whether she'll listen to the podcast, but
Jesus.
yeah, I had to put our house up as collateral, as I had to put the house up.
Wow.
To the company that run the Empire. They insisted that they had this, you know, so I had to borrow money against the mortgage to put up like £30,000 surety.
Wow.
To do it. But anyway, we raised the money and we got Michael back to the country, but that wasn't the end of it, because then we had to clear his name. We had to persuade Jack Straw. We had to persuade the government to get him freed, give him a pardon. I remember getting him a lie detector test, the first ever prisoner in history in the UK to have a lie detector test. And I was sitting, I was watching Jeremy Kyle or whatever, and you know, this guy was on doing a lie detector test and stuff, whatever, and whatever. And I thought to myself, it'd be great if we could get. So we made contact with the Jeremy Kyle show, and we got the guy, and he come and met me, and I said, listen, if we can do it, you know, would you do it? And he said, yeah. And of course I said to Michael, you know, listen, if we can get this sorted, would you be willing? He said, yeah, of course, absolutely. So we set up a lie detector test. I had to go through the Home Office to get a permission, because they had to grant permission. And we had to go through the governor of the prison as well to make sure that he was on board with it. So we took him up there to the prison, and Michael done this lie detector test in the prison, and of course it came out absolutely clear that he hadn't done it.
The untold story of Michael Shields, a Jeremy Kyle lie detector test, and Joe Anderson putting his house up.
Yeah, and you know, Michael knows that, because I was there. I was sitting in a room while he was in a room doing his lie detector test, and of course when he come out, the fella goes away then, and I stayed in the prison for a little while. The guy goes away and analyses it, you know, and looks at all his data and stuff. It only takes about an hour, if that, less than that. And of course he come out, you know, and he said,
and then you can present that to whoever and say,
and we did, yeah.
You did,
yeah. We did. We
it's
did
an incredible
it
story.
We did it to Jack Straw. We went down to there. I visited Michael he was moved around prisons, and you know, an awful lot. I think it was like 28 institutions he was in. You know, he was in that mad one in London, you know, he was in there when he came back from Bulgaria for about a
week. It Wentworth or
somewhere like that, one of the notorious prisons. He was in there, and then he was moved different places, and it was great. And you know, I remember getting a car donated to me, somebody I knew, And he said to me, if there's anything we can do, Joe, just let me know. And he owned garages, the land around garages. And I said to him, well, you know what? I think if we, raffle a car, I said, we'll get a damn sight more than the car's value, because people will want to buy the tickets. I said, but we need something big to do it. So following day, he rang me, a fella called Jerry. He rang me the following day, and he said, I got you the car. I went, what? And he said, yeah, got you the car there. It was like a Fiesta or whatever it was. So we put this car up for raffle, and I took it to Anfield, took it to St John's Precinct, took it to Goodison, took it around different places and sold raffle tickets. And I remember the day we were having the raffle, and it was we had a campaign office near where Michael lived, and we were raffling the car that morning. So Marie, Michael's mum, was actually doing the raffle, pulling the thing out the hat. So there was about 150 people in this room, this small room, all excited and waiting for the raffle to take place. The media were there, BBC Northwest, ITV, the radios, and Marie pulls out this ticket, and it goes, 153, whatever it was, Tommy, so turn over the tickets, got a telephone number on it, so here we go. And it was mobile, it was a mobile. Here we go, let's ring this number. So ring, answers. Oh, goes, oh, hello? So I said, hello? Hi, is that Tommy? Yeah. I said, it's Joe Anderson here from the Labour Party. How are you? You okay? Yeah, all right, lad. I said, it's just ringing you up, Tom. Great news for you. You bought a raffle ticket for the car. Yeah. Well, you've won the car. Oh, I don't want that, lad. I said, what? You don't? Oh, put it back in. Put it back. I said, you can't. You've won it. And everyone's looking at me, in the room. What? Because I'm talking to the guy on the phone. Everyone's staring at me, and I'm going, you can't put it back in. And they're all shaking their head and looking at each other. Going, I said, you can't put it back in. He said, no, I don't want a car, lad. Don't drive. Don't. I said, you must have someone, family and stuff, whatever. No. Just put it back in. I said, where are you? I'm in Ward 23 in Fazackley Hospital. So he was in hospital. So me and Michael Shields Senior went to see him, and we persuaded him to take the car, and he gave it to his nephew.
Oh,
but that only in Liverpool, put it back in. Yeah. So we had to
brand new car.
Yeah, brand new car. I don't want that, lad. Put it back in. So it was great. But yeah, I mean, lovely family, lovely lad.
Yeah, he's a top lad.
I helped Michael get the job he's got and stuff when I've been working with a good friend of mine who gave him a job. He's got a lovely wife, 2 kids, great family. The family are just wonderful people, and the great friends of mine, and stayed in touch but as I said, it was totally innocent. So it was a great chunk of my life, about 5 years, and a lot of people give me stick. Lots and lots of people saying, he did it, you shouldn't be getting involved in that, politician, you shouldn't be getting involved in that. And that was before I became leader of the Labour Party in Liverpool, the Labour group. It was before I became leader, and when I became leader, and a lot of people saying, no, you shouldn't be doing that, whatever. And of course, I think I was proven right, because he's a wonderful lad. Married to.
Were they just saying that because they thought you were just doing it for your own publicity and that, like, obviously?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I think, and in some senses that you shouldn't, get involved in issues and stuff, what have you. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things I think that makes me so proud of this city is that, this city stands up for injustice. We see that with Hillsborough, we see that, as I said, with Michael Shields. And that's why, even in my battle now, I want to make sure that people hear my voice. And one of the things that Liverpool do more than I think any other city or whatever, in a way, is allow people to have their voice heard. And that's important, isn't it? It's important for fairness and justice and natural justice that people have the right to have their voice heard. And that's what was tried to be denied Liverpool people over Hillsborough and stuff, what have you. And the city united, and the support that Michael got as well during his time from the city. There was just a few naysayers and stuff, but the vast majority of people knew he was innocent.
On that football note, one thing that we had loads of questions from, and I've thought it myself over the years, and I can't let this go without asking you one thing, which I think for you will have tarnished, not tarnished, maybe it's a bit strong, but people were just a bit baffled by on the football thing, was when a mayor, someone who's got all the problems that you spoke about, when you tweeted the police, because I know you're a big blue, about the Ross Barkley transfer, I think a lot of people then were kind of like, why is the Mayor of Liverpool tweeting the police over a transfer? And I think that just lost so much of the respect. The things like, for example, you've
well, let me tell you why I did it, and of course, because like everything else, you know, nobody's infallible in a sense, and sometimes you do things that you regret. Do I regret that? No, I don't. I'll tell you why, because I've never separated, and one of the things that I do is I do my own Twitter account. So what you get and what you see is authenticity. It's me. It's who I am.
It's important.
So when I comment on football, and sometimes I get annoyed because I'm a blue nose. I've been watching Everton since I was 7-8 years of age in the boys' pen, and I'm passionate about the football club. When I seen somebody like Ross Barkley, when I seen what happened, for me, he was valued and was an extension of his contract offered and everything else. And I won't tell you, but a very senior figure at Everton said I was absolutely spot on for making the comment that I made, because they were pissed off as well, because at the end of the day, they lost the opportunity to get money into the club through a proper sale of him. But he went to, wherever he went, and he ended up remaining injured. So he couldn't be sold on. And then he went for a fraction of what he was valued at, and could have been valued at, and could have been sold at. So, I don't regret saying that. A lot of people say, well, what's that got to do with the mayor? Well, it's got to do with the mayor, who's an Evertonian. Well, if people say, we don't like you involving your sport with your politics, well, don't go on my website then, or don't go on my Twitter account if you don't think I should.
I think it's great how you manage your own Twitter, and you are passionate about football. I think what made a lot of people like snigger, if you like, was if that was one of the lads in the pub or something, and a referee decisions went the wrong way, and he tweeted the Premier League and said, "Oi mate, you'd go fucking hell, lad."
I think that's unfair, because I think at the end of the day it's a bit different than that, isn't it? This was about, in my view, it was deliberately orchestrated to stop Everton getting the value that they should have got for that player. And I think that's wrong.
Oh yeah, it is.
And so for me to say you should have a look at that, I think that if for instance there was emails, or if there was comments made from the figures at one club to him to say, stay where you are, don't what have you, we'll sign you. And all I was saying to the police is, this needs looking at, because it went from a value that should have been given to Everton Football Club to what we ended up getting for them, and there was a big difference. And I think whether people like it, or whether if I could turn back the clock and say, would you say it or would you do it again? Yeah, I would.
Did you hear from the police, by the way?
Yeah, just to say that they'd asked questions, and that they were satisfied with the responses that they got. So
on that then, when it comes to, I'm just thinking of which we go into after this, but because I know as a Liverpool fan, it definitely made me snigger to think, what the fuck's the mayor tweeting Merseyside police about a transfer?
Well, would you have thought that way if you were a blue?
If one of my mates had tweeted someone saying,
even though, so say for instance,
Joe, I'll be honest, I'd be going, lads, what the fuck are you doing?
Well, say for instance, Mo Salah was refusing to sign a contract, and he's only got 1 year left, and that if he signed an extension now, he could be, the club could get 60-70 million for him, but he deliberately didn't, because he knew that his agent was going to get a bung for him to sign an on fee and stuff, whatever, and therefore he wasn't going to do that. He was going to go. Would you not be incensed by that?
Of course I would.
Well, there you go. So why am I any different than you?
You're not. We're both football fans. Exactly. Both passionate. So I'd sit there and I'd go, the fucking money grabbing bastard, but I wouldn't tweet the police about it.
Well, if you think that people who are fraudulently behaving or
but it's a business, it's a business, isn't it? You see it all the time with football agents.
I mean, with the greatest respect, you can't say to me, Andy, that politicians are in some way not morally correct and stuff, but think that it's okay for football agents.
But what people would argue though, and say pick your battles. If you're leader, a mayor of a council, and
I wouldn't just pick a battle because I think I could win it. Sometimes you make comments on things because they make you angry or they they make you annoyed to an extent that you want to say something about it.
I just seen.
I had, lots and lots of people, by the way, lots and lots of people who contacted me, and as I just said to you, a very, very senior figure at Everton Football Club, so I was absolutely right.
I know, Joe. I can.
So
as I'm a football family, I know what you mean. I just know that from Liverpool fans, and maybe now the kind of picture that you've painted. It's like there's problems going on in the city, and the mayor's fucking tweeting Merseyside police about fucking Ross Barkley.
I got crap and shit to an extent that I'm baldy, but it would turn any hair I had fucking grey, for buying Finch Farm. I got absolutely battered, and yet Liverpool as a council enabling us to help us support keeping libraries, children's centres open and stuff. We get £1.2 million. We own Finch Farm and we get 1.2. The amount of shit I got over funding Everton Stadium.
Well, that's what I was going to come
by
on to
Liverpool
next.
Fans.
I mean,
and yet it's to be done for the benefit of Liverpool. It probably won't happen now. But at the end
you
of the
don't
day,
think the stadium will happen now?
Oh, the stadium will happen. Yeah, the stadium will happen. Of course it will. I mean, the story behind the stadium is another issue where, I'm proud to have been a part of getting Peel Holdings and Everton Football Club to do a deal. But in relation to the stadium, it will happen. It'll probably be the best thing in generations to have happened in the city in terms of the economic impact, the jobs, and the boost that it'll give to our economy. It's phenomenal, and it's.
I hope
it's
it does
fantastic
happen.
That
I hope it does happen.
I'm just giving you, my point about the Ross Barkley thing. I think people should just either move on. Yes, if those that don't like what I said or whatever, then
I don't think
we'll fuck off. Then don't follow me on Twitter if you don't like it.
Joe, I'm a footy fan.
People.
I'm a massive footy fan. I'd be fuming if Salah went on a free, and I'd be fuming. I just mean you had that, and then you had all the thing about the ground and stuff like that. And
Ross Barkley was a Liverpool lad, an Evertonian.
It happened with Steve McManaman.
Well, of course it didn't. It happened with others as well. And we didn't have Twitter or we didn't have whatever. Just because I'm the mayor of Liverpool,
would have thought, I'll be honest,
doesn't mean to say I'm not passionate about my football.
No, I would have thought though you'd regret that though.
Well, why?
I just think it made it look a bit silly.
No, I think that's what people wanted to say. But there was a legitimate sort of point there, and that point was that the possibly
that Ross Barkley's a money grabbing bastard.
well, yeah, that's a fair comment, but other people were too.
Oh yeah, of course.
And it was manipulated in a way. I mean, look, is it a coincidence that for that period of time he wasn't allowed to play? And then when the season was over...
It happened with Michael Owen. Michael Owen, when he went to Real Madrid, if he didn't play in the Champions League...
But there was no social media then.
But I don't think anyone was knocking on the police door either, though, and saying, hey, go and...
How do we know that
okay,
people didn't raise it? So,
But one thing on that, though, the joking aside, one thing that I thought would be interesting for you is that the abuse you've got over that from Liverpool fans. Obviously, we know you're a massive blue, and now the whole... idea of the new ground and stuff, and how the council were then helping to fund it and giving loans and various bits and bobs. The abuse you've now endured from Liverpool fans. We talk all the time when we see about it's Mental Health Awareness Week and trolls on Twitter and stuff like that, and you've got me kind of half taking the piss saying, why did you call the police? But when that comes on social media, I mean, how has that been? Because
it's tough.
It kind of been nice at times.
No, it is tough. I mean, what I've been through over the last, I was arrested on the 4th of December, and 20 coppers come into my house and took me away, and that has been a massive, blow and shock to me to be accused of the things I've been accused of. But then to see, this report and people having a go at me. In and on social media, and I'd be lying if I said that it didn't have an impact on me. you know, but at the end of the day, I don't want this to sound, you know, as if it's demeaning of people with mental health problems, because it isn't, because you know, we all have and go into, you know, dark places sometimes. We all feel really low and stuff, and that's happened to me. But you know, I'm also, as I said, you know, a great believer in my faith, and I'm also you know, made of good quality Liverpool 1 dingle stock. And that means that I will fight back and stand up for myself. And, you know, I don't like bullies. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why it incenses me to be accused of bullying now. You know, don't like bullies. I stand up to bullies. And as far as I'm concerned, I'll fight my corner here. But yeah, it's been tough. I tell you what has been really tough is watching my family having to put up with seeing the abuse that I've got. You know, my wife, who's done, you know, absolutely nothing wrong, has been, you know, fearful about going out to shops and stuff, whatever, about people talking, you know, and stuff, whatever. My grandchildren, one of my grandchildren in school was saying, oh, your granddad was, you know, taken by the police and stuff, whatever. That's wrong. That's bad. That's hateful for me as a granddad and a dad to watch my children suffer as a result of me doing what I've done, which is the best I could possibly do for my city. So, you know,
was it a total shock then in December when, I mean, you had no inkling of
when 20 police officers just stormed?
Yeah, 7 o'clock in the morning, 7:05 in the morning. Marg was up. She'd just been out with the dog. She'd come back in. I think as she was coming in, the door got flung open. And,
what, like, as in booted down, as in?
No, not booted down, but the door was sort of open as she was coming in and getting the dog's lead off and stuff, whatever, as they then all marched in, shouting, "Please stay where you are, stuff, whatever. I was just getting up because it was Friday. I had the cabinet meeting at 9 o'clock, so I'd like to prepare for that, get up and get a shower. And the next thing, you know, marching up the stairs and downstairs was 20 police officers that came into the house. And so
what the fuck's even going on in your head now?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I've always argued that you know, if the police wanted to speak to me, I'd have come voluntary. You know, I'd have gone and spoke to them, talked to them, give them information, which I have done. You know, when I was interviewed, I didn't say no comment. I gave them everything they asked for, gave them all details of my bank, my PIN numbers for my emails, my, you know, passwords, so they could get into everything. So they could have asked for that without arresting
Why didn't they?
That's a question for them to answer, isn't it? I mean, I was put on bail, and the bail extended. And then they tried to extend, or they were going to extend the bail again till September of this year, but we were challenging that in court, and they withdrew the bail, ironically on the same day that Max Caller produced his report, because they said that they pulled the plug on the bail, halted the bail conditions on me because of the Caller report. Question needs to be asked, well, why did they put me on bail in the first place? What it done was, of course, wrecked my political career. It wrecked it. Basically, it meant that the Labour Party, because I was arrested and put on bail, if I'd have been arrested and not put on bail, the Labour Party say they wouldn't have suspended me, but because I was put on bail, they suspended me, which meant I couldn't stand in the elections as the mayor again. So it ended my political career.
Do you think there's a bigger like a bit of bigger?
Absolutely. There's clearly, you know, when I look at the report and you know, I've set up a website and I've put my response to that report on it. I've put cabinet reports, I've put documentation on there, and I've give explanations as to why you know, this report is flawed and wrong and full of lies. I'll give you one example of a lie on my phone, which obviously your listeners can't hear, but in front of me I have my phone, and on my phone is a tape recording of an interview that Max Caller had with me. I recorded it. He doesn't know that, or he does now because I've mentioned it on the website, but I recorded our interview. And Max Caller says in his report, and a quote from it, you know, I haven't got it in front of me, but I can basically report, it says on that I say that Liverpool businesses and only Liverpool businesses who have a Liverpool postcode should get work for Liverpool City Council, as stated in interview. That's what he says. Now, I've got the transcript of that report. As I said, it's on the website, and I mentioned no such thing. So why does this man tell lies in a sense that clearly is? It's not true, and the transcript proves that. You know, there are other things within the report. One of the things that sensationally gave people, you know, this impression that Liverpool was a dysfunctional council was, he says in his report, the paperwork was thrown in a skip. Confidential paperwork was thrown in a skip. And if you remember, that's what Robert Jenrick said in the Commons. He said a dysfunctional council and paperwork being thrown in a skip. So when we find out what that is and what it was, there was a private partnership between Liverpool City Council and a company called Mayoral, and it was established 13 years ago. Around about 7 years ago, I ended the partnership. I scrapped it because it was costing Liverpool too much money. And we were based in the municipal buildings in Dale Street at the time, not in the Cunard building. And when they were decanting, in other words, when they were decanting, leaving the municipal buildings, they were throwing paperwork in a skip. And it was council officers who were retrieving it and bringing them back in. So it was Mayoral staff that were throwing the paperwork in the bin, in the skip. And it was council staff that weren't. Now, you know, anybody else would say, well, you know, that's great. And why is he mentioning that then? Because it was council staff that were bringing them in. So why are you criticising council staff? Well, that's a question that needs to be asked. And equally, why is he talking about that and something that happened 7 years ago? I'll tell you why. Because it helps smear me and it helps smear the council, doesn't it? It's the same thing about bullying.
What is the bigger plan, though, Joe? Why would they want to try and out you and smear you?
Well, that is something that I, don't forget the Calla report took place after the police arrest. So, you know, there's questions to be asked about, you know, whether there was any talk and communication between Merseyside Police, the local government, Max Calla. Of course there was. We know there was, because Max Calla says he had an arrangement, an agreement with Merseyside Police to have a discussion with them about what he could say, what he couldn't say, what he could talk about and what he couldn't talk about. So, you know, all I can say and all I can actually demonstrate is what I know to be the truth by providing documents and giving information. You know, there's another claim about, you know, we brought our refuse collection, we were talking about the costs of it and stuff before. You know, just for street cleansing, that's the brushing up and stuff, whatever, and the amount of staff that we employ. But to run street cleansing and the refuse collection, it's around about £30 million, the contract that we used to have with a company called Amy. Now, Amy, I got rid of them and brought the service back in-house to be run by the council. Now, Max Calla says in the first year that cost us £2 million, and it wasn't best value for ratepayers, for people of the city. Well, the £2 million was to pay for all the bin lorries that we brought back. We had to buy them back off the company, and all the equipment that the company had, we had to buy them back. They're not going to give us them back for nothing. So we had to pay for them. So we had that £2 million. But what he doesn't say was that was an investment. What he also doesn't say is that the cost of managing that contract with Amy used to charge the council 10% management fee, and 10% of 30 million is 3 million. That's what it used to cost us to run that contract. And now it's been brought back in-house. It doesn't cost us that at all. So we make a saving of £3 million. But that's deliberately left out of the report. And I've made it clear and shown people in the documentation, the cabinet reports, but also in the information that I provide in that. And people need to ask the question, why didn't he explain that? That makes complete sense to you, doesn't it? If you're sitting there nodding away when I'm telling you that we make £3 million savings because we don't pay management fee to Amy, a private sector company, anymore, and we now have the service back in house and the council running. Makes perfect sense to people.
Are they trying to say that you? So this Max Calla, who is this Max Calla guy?
Max Calla has been sent in by the Tory government as a result of Merseyside Police arresting me.
Right.
So they've then come in to look at the council and how the council operates, saying they want to look at best value. So he's come in and spoke to officers of the council and stuff, whatever, and they've come up with this. It's like, you know, nobody does anything wrong in the council other than me. So if there's things gone wrong, it's all my fault. Things have gone good, I don't get any credit for it. But everything that's gone wrong, I get the blame for. The accusation of bullying in the council. There's over 5,000 staff work for Liverpool City Council. How do I know if Betty's giving Mary a hard time or Tommy's giving Jack grief every single day? How would I know about that if nobody tells me? So we have trade unions that are involved in Liverpool City Council, and we have lots of people. I've been there 11 years. We also have what's called the dignity in work policy. We also have the whistleblowing procedures. So if people were getting bullied, they can actually tell people and say to people.
Is that what they're saying, that like internally it was bullying?
There was a culture of bullying and intimidation.
Are they not saying you're bullying people?
That's it, isn't it? So for the last 18 months since COVID, I've been working at home because I'm shielded, because I've got a heart condition and I've been working at home. So where's the bullying coming from? And if I was bullying, why is it only just coming to light now? Why is it not 11 years ago? So I've only just started bullying in the last 6 months, have I? Or the last 18 months? It's absolute nonsense.
I know what you say. What would you say then to people who we've kind of alluded to it there, Joe, but like, you don't get 20 police officers storming through your front door if you haven't done anything wrong. What would you say to...
There's no smoke without fire, that's all people will think.
I refer back to our conversation about Michael Shields. I remember people saying exactly that about Michael Shields, and we proved Michael Shields' innocence simply by providing the facts and the information. But the media at that time were absolutely targeting the Shields family and Michael Shields, and he must be guilty. The police have arrested him. They've said that there's a witness, and they've said this, they've said that. Now, I'm not comparing myself to the traumatic time that Michael Shields went through, but the reality is that my website has now shown some of the things that I've just talked about, more facts, more information that prove that the allegations are not true. But let's go back to the police. Let's go back to the police inquiry. The police accused me of receiving £20,000. Okay, it was in the Telegraph, it's been reported. They said, you received £20,000 for the Mayor's Fund. So I said, what Mayor's Fund? So they said, well, you tell us. And I said, well, hang on, what do you mean by the Mayor's Fund? So they said that there was a donation made from 4 different businesses to the Mayor's Fund. So I said, I don't know nothing. Any donations that's made to the Labour Party is made to the Treasurer. Anything that is made is declared so people can see it, and it goes through the Electoral Commission. So
I do have the article up here, by the way, on the Telegraph, which we can...
Yeah, there you go. So there you go, in terms of like when it comes down to the fact about this 20,000. On the Monday, I got my solicitor to contact a guy who the police had claimed that a whistleblower had told them that an officer who'd been arrested had told him that he'd got £20,000 for the Mayor's Fund. So I got my solicitor to ring his solicitor to ask what was he talking about. Anyway, we find out that there was indeed £20,000 raised, but it was for the Lord Mayor's charity fund. So 4 businesses contributed £5,000 each to the Lord Mayor's charity fund. And that was the £20,000. But I was getting accused of me taking the bribe when there's a difference between the Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor's charity fund and me, and I don't have a fund. So, that was one area. The other area was witness intimidation. I was accused of witness intimidation. It's public knowledge. It's been in the press. People said that I was witness intimidation. And I was told who this witness was. Well, I didn't even know that person was a witness. And I was told that one of the things that I was doing, I was writing to myself. So there was FOIs, Freedom of Information requests made to the council, and they were made asking me to sack the chief executive
of the council.
So I was writing to myself to ask myself to sack the chief executive. Okay, well, it's exactly bizarre in that sense. Yeah. But you can't sack a chief executive. I couldn't sack a chief executive if I wanted to sack a chief executive, because you have to go through a proper process. You have to go through a proper procedure. And what we call the Appointments and Disciplinary Panel make that decision, not me. So how can they make that claim? Equally, How could they make the claim that I was intimidating a witness when I didn't know who the witness was? So, yeah, and by the way, another thing that people don't know about this, when they said to me, I was writing these FOIs with other people, they said to me, where were you on the 30th of October? So I said, I don't know. Why? What I don't know. What day is that? And so they were looking for the date and stuff, whatever. I said, why? And they said, well, your cell phone was in an area with other people's cell phones, and we want to know why. So I said, what day was the 30th of October? So they come up and they said, it was a Friday. I said, Friday the 3rd? That was the day I buried my brother. So I lost my brother Billy through COVID. And on the Friday the 30th of October, I buried him with his wife and some of our family. And that day, I'd gone to Allerton at 9:45 in the morning to his house, 53 Reddington Road. I'd picked up the cortege and my sister-in-law. We left around about 10:20. We drove to St. Nicholas's Church in the Pierhead, witnessed by hundreds of people. I gave the eulogy about my brother and spoke at it. We went back to Allerton Cemetery for 1:30 for the burial. We buried my brother, and at 2:00, 7 of us went for something to eat in Allerton Golf Course, 7 of us, and we left about 6:00. Now, according to them, I was actually collaborating with people, conspiring with people on that day to actually witness intimidate somebody. I found that an absolute utter insult and a disgrace, not just to me, but to my brother and to my sister-in-law. That's what they said I was doing. So, look, the claims and what Merseyside Police have said about me, that will be dealt with, and that will be dealt with by Merseyside Police and me, and I will continue to cooperate with them. So I need to park that to one side, but equally, remember there's a link between that and the Calla report, because the Calla report only happened because of Merseyside Police's arrest of me. Let's be absolutely clear. That's the reason why Calla was sent into Liverpool, as a result of Merseyside Police's arrest. So I'll deal with the arrest. I'll deal with what the police are saying. And since then, by the way, they've dropped the bail. I haven't been charged with anything. I defend myself and will defend myself till my dying day, that I've done nothing wrong. I've took no bribe. I wouldn't, I didn't, and never have done. And I'm proud of the way I've led my city. And I'll prove my innocence. And in the Calla report, I'll show and demonstrate that this city was run in a proper way. This city was run in a proper way. Now, if some things went wrong and other people were doing something in an improper way, then that has to be dealt with. That has to be dealt with. But did I know about it? Did I conspire with them? Did I want to involve myself with them in doing anything wrong? Absolutely not.
But is that your role, though, as mayor, the man front and centre? Is not some responsibility on you if there are, dodgy dealings going on in the background?
The thing is, again, and it comes back to this, Andy, and it's the real challenge that I have, and it is to try to explain to people the difference between my role and the difference between statutory officers of the council and their role, and whose responsibility is it. Don't ever think that it's me as mayor of the city that I make every decision and everything gets done through me. We have 3 statutory officers at the council: a chief executive, a city solicitor who's called a monitoring officer, and a financial director who's called a 151 officer. And it's their statutory responsibilities, and they have veto powers to make sure that no land sales can take place without the council getting best value. No deals can be done by the council without making sure that we get best value, or they are proper deals. They go through cabinet processes, are supported by everybody. So you can't just blame me if things have gone wrong. But I don't believe in most of the cases that have been highlighted to me, and they're the ones that I've seen. I don't believe there's anything gone wrong anyway. I don't believe, for instance, like the Amy arguments about or land transactions.
Well, that's the big one, land transactions. When I speak to people, it's why is Joe let this land go for 800-900 grand, and then 2 years later it's going for 4 million?
Well, I've yet to see that evidence where that's the case. So when some people, I heard people talk about the famous Tom Academy, where we'd bought 4 pieces of land. And people say, well, Tom Academy didn't happen and you bought that land for the Tom Academy. We didn't buy the land for the Tom Academy. We bought the 4 pieces of land because of the 10 streets and because of Bramley Moor and because the value of the land was going to go up. That's what, and we still own those 4 pieces of land. So, the idea that we've lost money because we still own them and the value will have gone up. So we still own them. So where's the problem with that? I haven't seen anything yet where it's shown me that, when you come along and have a piece of land and it's valued at £1 million, you then may well develop on that site. And 3 years later, the site's worth £4 million because of the development and the work that's been done on it or activity that's gone on around it.
That's where I think people are now very rightly or wrongly, and you're going to say, but your things maybe aren't going to tender or things are getting better deals.
But they did. And every transaction that Liverpool City Council undertook, for instance, a sale of land, it was valued. It has to be legally valued. Has to be, by law, it has to be. So you get external valuation of it done, and then it's sold at the external valuation. That's what happens. And those 3 statutory officers that I've just informed you of have to sign that off. So I don't sign it off. I don't sign any papers off that sells a piece of land to anybody. I don't do that. Neither does this mayor or any mayor in any other part of the country.
Yeah, that's one thing. One of the questions was about, I think.
Well, no, but that's the point about the challenge for me is to try to get across that information that I don't. It's not me. If you're the chief executive and you're the city solicitor, Tom, you're working for Liverpool City Council. Any land transaction, you have to sign it off. Right. You have to agree. You have to agree that that's the value. Where's the proof that it's been valued at that price? There it is. Should we sell it? Yes, we do. There's some land that we wouldn't sell or don't sell, but there's other land that we do sell because we know that we haven't got the money to invest in it, but others have, and they create jobs. Right. Look, another example would be Allerton Golf Course. Now, that's mentioned in the report. It claims that I had lunch at Allerton Golf Course and didn't declare the lunch. It's a lie. I didn't have lunch at Allerton Golf Course. I went with a fella called Ben Fitzpatrick, who worked in my office at the time, and we went to see the development on the site, and we had a cup of coffee. So that's why it wasn't declared. But Calla claims that and it doesn't look like it was declared in the members' interest. But well, why mention that? All he had to do was ask Ben Fitzpatrick or ask me, but he didn't. He wanted to put that out as a smear. But he talks about the golf courses. You talked about how money gets spent and where things get spent and why you end up doing things that you do. We've got 2 golf courses in the ownership of Liverpool City Council, Allerton Golf Course and Kirby Golf Course. We own both of them. They were losing £800,000 a year. £800,000 a year. That's how much they were losing. We were paying staff. They weren't collecting fees from anybody. The maintenance of them, whatever, £800,000 a year. And because of all the cuts, we had choices. We either closed them and mothballed them, or sold them. And I decided that we weren't going to do either of those things. We were going to bring in a private sector company to work with us to help run those golf courses. And lo and behold, that's what we did 7 years ago. So over that 7 years, we've saved £800,000. That's £4 million. We've saved it. That's what we would have had to pay. But we get a rental income off the 2 owners, the golf courses.
The private,
of £100,000. And they've invested £7 million and created 150 jobs. Right. And have you been to Allerton Golf Course?
No. I haven't, but I've got a lot of friends.
And have you been to Knowsley, Kirby Golf Course? Go and have a look. Go and have a look at Allerton Golf Course. I've
seen the Allerton Lunch Boss. I've seen on Instagram.
It's transformed. It's one of the best municipal golf courses in the country. Now, we're criticised by Calla for doing that because...
So is Calla saying that, you got a mate's firm in to run that, and then there was a backhand? Is that the premise?
Not in that particular instance. No, he claims that we should have. He claims in some senses that we should have leased that, or we should have sold on the lease of that building rather than do what we've done and get a rental income. Well, the council needs money, rental coming in to pay for services, so we wouldn't do that. And they've been transformed. We've now got 150 jobs of rental income coming in, and we've stopped hemorrhaging money. Now, that's a great deal. That's a best value deal. Yeah, it's smeared in a way that suggests that there was impropriety going on.
Where does
I couldn't.
Well, I won't say where, but I see in the thing about the Elliott Group, Now, I think that's where a lot of this talk of brown envelopes come from, and like friends' businesses and families' businesses, because of all that kind of thing. Can you not see where then people are maybe putting 2 and 2 together?
And coming up with 7. Yeah, I can see that. Because that's exactly what... I remember 2 old women coming to me in the 2016 mayoral elections in Allerton, and 2 old women come up to me, and one of them said, "Hi, Mr. Anderson, can I speak to you, please?" I said, "Of course you can, no problem. What is it?" And she said, "Do you live in a red row house?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Oh, does your wife work for Red Row?" I said, "No." I said, "I live in a terraced house in Old Swan," which I did at the time. I said, "And Marg's a nurse at Fazackley Hospital, an auxiliary nurse at Fazackley Hospital." Those smears have been there for years. The Red Row suggestion that I'm Red Row Joe, doing dodgy deals. Yeah, that was great. No, seriously, no. So that's funny.
It is a good.
I take the piss out of it myself. I often say that. That's when I write my book. That's what I'm going to call me. The title Red Row Joe, because that was the Lib Dems, and because they were smearing about Allerton Golf Course, they were saying Red Row houses were going to be built on Allerton Golf Course. All of those things, and of course the bottom line was that was what wasn't the case. But that's the smears. That's the type of things that you end up putting up with. Now, again, coming back to Elliott Group.
As soon as you type in that Elliott Group, it's just, we think deals going wrong, and there's you standing there and stuff. For people who just maybe look at it and stuff, you think...
And what are the blogs and what are the people behind these blogs writing about? Look, Elliott Lawless, I hardly knew. Promise you, hardly knew. Most of the dealings that Elliott Lawless had were with other councillors and other officers of Liverpool City Council. But is he a successful business guy? Yes, he has. As the major developments taking place that he's been involved in this city, yes, there is. Are there things gone wrong? Yes, there have. That's happened with others, not just in Liverpool, but in other places around the country. The police are investigating them. That's a matter for the police and the Elliott Group, isn't it? But this idea that we were doing things that was in a untoward way or an improper way to support the Elliott Group is absolute bullshit. And if people can demonstrate or show that, and I come back to the point, by the way, and I'll make this point clearly again, is that any deal that was done by the council with the Elliott Group was done by statutory officers, not by me. So those statutory officers have signed them off.
It seems to be more personal, doesn't it, towards you then? People making it.
Yeah, but that's the way life is, isn't it? This comes back to how smears are not just created, but enhanced and developed. If you look at St James's Place, if you look at other deals that have been done with the Elliott Group, they're signed off by the chief executive, not by me. They're signed off by officers, and they would only sign them off if they were satisfied that the deal was a best deal or a good deal for Liverpool City Council. Otherwise they wouldn't do that. Otherwise they wouldn't sign them off.
Do you think, Joe, that listening about your life and what you've done, you're incredibly successful through the Labour Party, then even from your sitting that you've started, and then this and that where you are now, do you think it's got to a point where maybe people were maybe jealous or thought you were kind of too big or too powerful? Obviously you're charismatic, you can sit there, you can talk to people, you've got a lot of back, and
you've always faced that though. That's something that I've faced since I became leader. People don't like success, do they? And politics is dirty. Politics is really nasty. We only have to see that about some of the things that are getting said about me on blogs by people who don't even know me, and the accusations are hateful but wrong. And some of them are very, very clever in the way they say things and suggest things. But I've always had that.
The only reason I say that is because on Jazza, and shout out to Jazza and John May on their podcast, they had Lawrence Kenwright on, who's another developer like the Elliott Group, and he finishes what he says about you and says, "Look, I like Joe. I wish him all the best," but says that you were giving land away for nothing, business deals. You caused them a lot of shit. Now, you could argue he's a successful guy like that, the Elliott Group. So, it's that comes back to that. People are going to be watching this thinking there's no smoke without fire. Why are they having fallings out there?
Seriously, I've always had a reasonably good relationship with Lawrence Kenwright.
Yeah, he speaks respectfully of you on the podcast.
Yeah. When I went to visit him he bought Millennium House from Liverpool City Council. And I was getting stick then by the Liberal Democrats and by other people who were saying we were selling it too cheap and blaming me for doing a deal with with Lawrence Kenwright. And you go and ask Lawrence about that and he'll tell you that's the truth. And Lawrence knows that we didn't do any deal. He bid for that, got it, and has turned it into, a hotel, successful hotel. When he done the work that he did with the homeless, I went and supported him. I went round there, worked with him, helped him do whatever. So all I can say to you is that I know that there was a lot of bad things that happened to him by councillors who had a grudge against him. And he knows I know that. And there was issues that he fell out with Liverpool City Council because he run the ground floor in the Cunard building for some time. And he owes a bill to Liverpool City Council, and I remember him mentioning it to me and saying, I said, well, it's got nothing to do with me. You have to deal with what you have to deal with. Why he has, or whatever, or he's suggesting that I've give land away. All I'd say to him is please show me where that's the case. Please evidence what it is you're claiming, and then let's deal with that.
I just feel like
because if it's the truth, let me say this to you, if it's the truth that I've give a piece of land away to free or whatever as he claims, I didn't hear the podcast and stuff, whatever, then why haven't the police arrested me over that? Why haven't the police dealing with that? Because I know nothing of it. All I can tell you is any land transactions, the very idea that I can give a piece of land to a mate or give a piece of land away to somebody is bollocks, quite frankly. It's bollocks, because I've just told you and explained to you that the statutory officers sign those off and agree them. And they've never had any, direction from me or whatever to give any land away. We wouldn't give land away. We can't give land away. It's illegal. So why would I do something blatantly bloody obvious that it's illegal if he's claiming that already?
We paraphrase. I mean, this is coming from Lawrence Kenwright himself. That's his channel. I presume it's got a photo of him on it, and he's just, the title of the video is Liverpool Council's Mayor Joe Anderson offered me 100 mil, and I said no. I mean,
he goes on to say about it, people are asking him to run for mayor, and he describes battle lines being drawn. And I just think where you're saying about this smear campaign come through, it's almost as if it's like you're the man at the top of the tree, and now people.
Let's be clear. If you go and have a look in my bank account, you'll see what I've got is very, very little. Okay, so I'm on the verge of claiming for universal credit. I haven't got any job, no income. Now, if I was somebody that was taking brown envelopes and somebody that was taking bribes, my wife started a cleaning job today. Okay? She's got 2 cleaning jobs. Do you think my wife, who's retired, I want her going back to work? If I was this fucking corrupt ogre with wads of fucking money coming out my ears, do you think that'd be the case? When he talks about lending him 100 million, I haven't got a clue what he's on about. I've got no recollection of me saying to him, I offer you £100 million loan or whatever.
As in the council.
How would I get that past the council or the cabinet?
How
would I get that past people?
It is.
So please treat his ludicrous claim as what it is, a ludicrous claim. And to be quite frank with you, what I've just said to you, how could I get £100 million loan to a business guy without going through some form of scrutiny? It's not the Bank of Liverpool City Council that I was running. It's Liverpool City Council. So if you believe what I'm just saying to you, how could I do that? Then treat whatever else he says as ludicrous as well, because it's what it is. I don't know why he says it. It's like Kilfoyle. Kilfoyle comes out with shit every day on this podcast. Peter Kilfoyle wanted me to back him to be the police commissioner and crime commissioner of Liverpool and Liverpool, the region, Merseyside region. And I supported Jane Kennedy. And since then, Kilfoyle has poisoned the atmosphere with drunken comments every single week. That's up to him. That's up to him. That's up to his conscience. And up to him as well. So if anybody's got any evidence of me doing anything wrong, if they've got any evidence, then let's see it. Let's bring it to this podcast and let's show you two. Let's see the evidence.
I think everyone will appreciate how honest you've been with it. And
100%.
Because, you know, like I say, people, we had so many questions for you. I'm putting to, and you've spoken about everything. So, you know, honestly, like, you're out.
Yeah, you don't have to come on this as well. So, like,
yeah, you're giving up your time to do it.
No,
one thing that angered
and
people.
And I could hide behind, you know, can't say nothing about that because the police are looking at that. Can't say nothing about that. No, that's not me. I'll say it. Might piss the police off, but, you know, I'm telling the truth as it is, as I see it, and what I know, and what I'm telling you. What I'm telling you, you know, about that ludicrous claim, he offered me 100 million, and I said no. You know, quite frankly, that's fictional.
Like, is the end game of this? Do you have to go to court? Like, is that how? So all this,
I don't know.
All this,
it depends on, you know, I've just told you and give you a couple of examples of what the police interviewed me about.
Yeah. Okay,
I've just told you. Now, on that basis, they were the reasons why the police arrested me. Okay, and I've just told you how ludicrous they are. This £20 million, this idea. You know, they said to me when I was arrested, and this is you know, something again you might find absolutely, you know, shocking, but it's the truth. I'm standing at the police station in front of the sergeant who's reading out the charges, and he says to me, "We've just arrested you from your property, 30 Greenfield Road in Old Swan, correct?" So I said, "No." So he looked at me. He said, "What do you mean, no?" And I said, "Well, you've just arrested me from 30 Greenfield Road, but that's not my property. I don't own it. It's my son who owns that." You could see panic. So he's looking at his mate down the end of the counter, and what's going on here? So where do you live? So I told him my address. I said, "But we don't actually live there yet." I said, "Because we've downsized. We don't own this house. My son has bought this house off me with a mortgage, and we've moved. You know, we are moving, but we haven't moved because of COVID, because we're waiting for work to get done and stuff like that." So in the police interview, they say to me, "You're living in Greenfield Road and your son's bought it. Well, isn't that just a scam?" I said, "What do you mean, is it a scam?" I said, "My son, who was brought up in that house, has decided to get a mortgage, and he's got a mortgage, and it's the mortgage company that's paid for the house and put it in my bank, and it's me that's used that money to buy a smaller property that we've downsized because there's only me and my wife. That's what sons and fathers do, isn't it?" "Yeah, well, you haven't moved." I said, "I haven't moved because of COVID." I said, "Because the estate agents couldn't act and couldn't do anything. The solicitors couldn't, and the builder who's doing some work on the house couldn't do it." So I had to explain all that, but they thought it was a scam. So, you know, for me, I've answered everything that the police have asked me, and I'll continue to do that. I'll continue to give the police the full cooperation they deserve. But what I'm not going to do is stay silent and not say, you know, why I feel aggrieved about what's happened to me. And there's no absolute disconnect between the Calla report and all of that's going on and the police arrest. Of course there is.
Sorry, I was just going to say, if whatever happens, you are found not guilty, and if, again, I don't know how this works, but would you then go down, and people who are listening can make their own judgment, and you've come across and said your piece, would you potentially sue for defamation
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
On that note, Joe, what angered people, and maybe it might not have angered them now they've known your story, is this claim, how true it was, I don't know, that you were asking the council to cover your fees, and people seem to get really angry over that.
Yeah, and again, it's because of lack of understanding, isn't it? You know, that the council has, let's be clear, every council across the country has an indemnity system. It's called an indemnity system. And basically it's there to protect councillors or officers or whatever that's been wrongly accused of issues or whatever in relation to jobs that they were doing and jobs they're doing for the council. So the allegation is that I've acted in an improper way as mayor, and I'm challenging that, and I'm saying, you know, I haven't done anything wrong. So I'm entitled to legal support under the indemnity scheme. It's like an insurance scheme. Now, what I know is that 7 officers of Liverpool City Council, 7 officers of Liverpool City Council have had indemnity paid, in other words, legal advice paid for by the council. So, and politicians as well. About 4 politicians in the last 3-4 years have had indemnity paid. So why is it that I can't have the indemnity provided to me when others have? But let me be clear here, let me be absolutely clear, that the indemnity is under the Constitution and it says I'm allowed to have that indemnity to defend myself. But if I'm found guilty, then it has to be paid back. Okay? So if I'm not found guilty, then I would argue that anybody who's brought those charges against me, i.e. Merseyside Police, whoever, will have to cough up and have to pay. So people are getting angry and annoyed. And members of the Labour Party, my own colleagues, making comments about it when they don't know or fully understand. But you know, one of the things that really, it pisses me off. It really pisses me off and makes me so angry. Is at the end of the day, I always felt and thought that especially Labour politicians, always believed in one central plank of the legal system, one central plank of the legal system, and that is you're innocent until proven guilty. That's fundamentally the basic tenet of human rights, of our legal system, and our lawful system that we have, that we're proud of as a country, that you're innocent until proven guilty. But the way it appears now in this city is I'm guilty until I prove myself innocent. And that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Do you regret then, if you think about your time in politics and obviously, you know, how it's ended now as such, do you regret going into politics because of this ending and way it's ended?
Absolutely not. You know, look,
even with all the trouble with like your sons.
I've gone through shit, you know, over the years. You know, when I became mayor and I was sacked by the school, indemnity was used to fight the case against me being sacked by the school. Now, the legal advice from Liverpool City Council and the then chief executive was you had to argue and fight it because they weren't sacking Joe Anderson, they were sacking the mayor. And so you could have been in your job and your company said you can't be the mayor, we're sacking you, even though you were doing a public service and a public duty. Yet forget about the fact that you were getting paid, by the way, because the school weren't paying me any money. Okay, the school were not paying me any money, but they sacked me. And so I got a lot of crap, a lot of stick, a lot of people saying, oh, you're taking money off the poor school and all of this stuff. And I got slaughtered for it. And I've had other things said to me, Red Row Joe, brown envelopes, all of the time. I've suffered, I can't go, you know, to Tesco with the wife or whatever because of the, you know, how sort of well known I am. And that comes with the job. But it sometimes does your head in that you can't even go, you know, whatever people want to tell you, their problems want to tell you that. I've put up with all of that. I've put up with, you know, working at 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning through to 8 o'clock at night. I've put up with not going away on holidays. I've put up with not seeing my kids the way other parents have seen kids because of how busy I am. I've put up with going away and flying to different countries and people might say, oh, that's a jolly. It's not a jolly. It's not a jolly. It's not a jolly to fly to China to attend meetings and tout for business for your city and have to go there on a regular basis or others when you love your family and you love your wife and you don't want to leave her and you don't want to leave your family and you're flying with a, you know, with a arc and you don't want to do it, but you're told it's a jolly, you're told, oh, what, all of those things.
I'd agree with that, mate, because I travel with work and it's fucking not a jolly.
Absolutely, but that's what I've put up with. And so, you know, it's a very good question. You know, would you, you know, do you regret it? No, I don't. I look around this city, I see the cruise liners, I see what's going to happen with Garden Festival sites, I see what's going to happen with King's Dock. I drive past them new schools, and I see our city transformed. I see new businesses. I see visitors coming here in the thousands. I witnessed the Giants. I witnessed the Three Queens. You know, people don't realise that the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra in Liverpool, they're only in that building and surviving because of me. The Everyman Theatre, brand new building, they're only there because of me, because of the decisions that I took, enabling them to actually have the freeholds, to borrow money, to actually reinvest. The Playhouse Theatre, the Epstein Theatre, the culture, the visitors that come here, the exhibition centre that brings us conferences from around the world to this city, the Pullman Hotel, as I said. All of those developments, not a screen, I remember it when I came to power. It was called the Boot Estate. It was absolutely a devastating place to live in for people. And we've changed it round. It's now called Not a Screen Village. I look at the investment that we've made in Speak and Garston and around Speak. The investment that we made in the airport. People don't know this. People don't know this story, Andy. It's important. People don't realise that Peel Holdings were closing Liverpool John Lennon Airport.
I didn't know that.
No, well, I'm telling you now. You wouldn't know until I told you. They were thinking of closing that and said to us, we've got no. And we invested in it. Liverpool City Council, I made the decision to invest in John Lennon Airport because a city that calls itself a global city, a first-class city without an airport is shit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's 4,000 jobs associated with that airport. We invested in that airport and it kept it open, and the investments turned it round. So much so that we bought 21% stake in it. About 6 months ago, we sold 10% stake in that airport, and we made a £17 million profit. And we still own 11%. That's best value. It secured the airport. There's loads of things we invested in Seqirus, a pharmaceutical company in South Liverpool and Speak. You look at the retail park in Speak. You look at Mersey Development Park in Speak.
Another thing, Joe, you can see how passionate you are and all those amazing things you've done. No one is doubting that. What I think your problem is now, and obviously by coming on the podcast, you're starting to get your side of the across. The problem you've got is, for example, I didn't know about Liverpool Airport. Yeah, when I was in a taxi coming here today, driving down County Road, and the fella says, "Oh, what are you doing, mate?" I said, "I've got a podcast. I'm speaking to Joe Anderson today." That's a normal fella on the cabs driving down County Road goes, "Ask him about his fucking son and these potholes." Like, there's so many little stories, whether the rumours, whether they're true, false. People have got this opinion of the potholes in County Road is stopped now because of this backhander and dodgy. How does this stop, if you like? Because I'm sure you can't answer you've done a great job of answering everything we've put to you, fair play to you, but how do you turn this around from...
My sister was driving in a taxi once, and I don't mind saying this, and I'll get some stick, but taxi drivers, quite a lot of them are Al quilts. In other words, Al gossips and smears and innuendo. I think these sometimes... No, they are. My son-in-law was a taxi driver and still is. So I say that, my sister was driving in a taxi, and the taxi driver was telling her about me owning a yacht, and I've got this red row house and stuff, whatever. So she let him prattle on, and she then eventually turned round to him and said, "Hey mate, can you just pull over please?" So he said, "Yeah, what is it, Lord?" He said, "She's just pull over please." And she said, I'm getting out." She threw £10 at him or whatever, and she said, "That's my brother, and I'm telling you that you're a lion," and give him total abuse. And that's, again, part of it. This claim that my son's company has benefited, whether it's work on potholes or whatever, this is how it grows, isn't it? This is how it grows. If you look at the website that I've created, you'll see thousands of documents that his company has provided to show that not only was the work he was doing was not with Liverpool City Council, wasn't with Liverpool City Council, it was a company that subcontracted his company to do work. Now, he was on their framework, what they call their framework, and he pays them a fee to be on their framework, and they used him. Now, at the end of the day, just because he's my son doesn't mean he can't work in this city.
course.
Now, at the end of the day, if there was anything corrupt about it or anything where he was getting work as a direct result of me, then people have a right to ask that question. But you prove it. Anybody out there, the taxi driver who spoke to you, prove that my son got work for any company or Liverpool City Council as a direct result of me, because it's not true. And my son will defend the allegations made against him, because he was arrested by Merseyside police. He will provide information that shows, and if people care to go and have a look at the site, they'll see all of the emails between Amy, Liverpool City Council, his company, all invoices, all the bills. Like, there was an accusation that his company was awarded £250,000 payment for Churchill flyover. It says it in the Max Calla report. That's not true. It's not true. There was 6 pieces of work that £250,000 covered on the highways network in Liverpool that he was doing. I know nothing about it because he works for Amy. Why would I know anything about it? Amy, you've just heard me saying I took work off Amy. Amy's not one of my favourite companies. You can see that in the stuff that I've just said. I knew nothing about it. I can hand on heart tell you I knew nothing about it. But at the end of the day, if he's got work through a legitimate process because he's one private sector company dealing with another private sector company, there's nothing wrong with that. And the jealousy or the innuendo and the smears, my message to people is put up or shut up. You know, don't go along with gossip. Ask to see the evidence. That's why I'm providing it on that website.
What is the website, Joe?
It's called joeanderson.co. joeanderson.co.
All one word, yeah.
Yeah, joeanderson.co, and type it in your address bar, not in Google. joeanderson.co, and you'll see documentation there, evidence there that is more than what Calla's put on his, on his report. And my rebuttal to his report, I put all that evidence out there.
I've got it up on screen now anyway, so that's the one, isn't it?
Fighting back.
Yeah.
Mate, again, and for anyone who is watching this, you've just come on there again before anyone makes a joke. We've not paid you to come on, nothing like that. No doubt that'll be a joke, but mate, you've come on off your own back, give us a few hours of your time to get your story across, and I think that's commendable in itself. Because
but Andy, that's what I've got to do. I've got to try to do that now. And but the point is people out there, I think, I take great comfort from the fact, yes, of course I can feel disillusioned, I can feel down when I hear stories about taxi drivers, or when I hear stories about people making those comments without knowing the full facts. It does depress me, but the only way that I'm going to try to get people to look and see for themselves is by trying to explain it. So it's a pleasure, for me to be here. Obviously, I wished I was here talking to, Bob Bramley more, and how I arranged the deal between Peel and Everton, and how wonderful that development's going to be, and the thousands of jobs. And I wished I could be doing that, and I wished I could be doing that as Mayor of Liverpool. But I'm not, and I can't.
Those rumours are always... One rumour I did get, and I thought this was... It might be true, I don't know, but are you related to the new Mayor, Joe Anderson?
No, not whatsoever, no.
That was one I got going. Apparently it's his cousin or something, or his sister or something like that.
No, we're not related at all.
One thing I must say is that about this podcast that we've done here is that you see politicians on Good Morning Britain, and it's like a 3-minute sort of section, it was usually Piers Morgan firing questions at them every 12 seconds. And I do think more politicians, I'm not just bigging up this podcast, but I think more politicians should come on long-form podcasts like this, where there isn't that time schedule of 2 minutes to try and get your point across, so that people can listen and hear from politicians, because people who are at home will make up their own decision in their own mind, but I think it's really important that format.
Well, it's important. It's an important point you make, but it comes back to the very start when we were chatting about, how do people interact with the press and stuff, whatever it is, politicians. The press are very, I had Channel 4 interviewed me in my back garden a couple of years ago. Not the back garden of the villa that I've got in Spain, or the one I've got in Barbados, or my back garden in my Red Row house, but my yacht. Back garden, yeah. But she started off and she said to me, Liverpool City Council was run like the mafia. And I just looked at her, and I said, you're trying to suggest that for 11 years I've been running Liverpool like a don, I'm Don Anderson.
Don Anderson.
And it's bizarre, that the trade unions or people or the Echo or podcasts like this or anybody has not been told these stories of now look, that's not me belittling anybody that felt. I said this on an interview I did with Granada. If anybody's felt bullied, I apologise. Those that have felt bullied at Liverpool City Council that I didn't know, but I'm only as good as the information that I get. So, as I said to you before, how would I know if somebody was bullying someone unless they came to me directly, or a whistleblowing thing came to me directly, or an officer reported it to me, or the trade unions reported it to me? How would I know? How would I know that?
Yeah.
So to try to accuse that of happening and me presiding over it, or me being a bully. I'll give you an example. One trade union representative rang me the other day and he said, what a load of shit. He said, about you being bullied. And he said he had COVID and he was in hospital and he was in a bad way. And I rang him up in hospital, spoke to him twice and spoke to his family and spoke to him when he come out and stuff. And he said, what other mayor would do that? Ring it up and stuff, whatever. And the idea that you're a bully or the idea that you're intimidating people, it's just an anathema. It's against everything that I am and I stand for. I hate bullies. I had a father who was a bully. I've stood up to bullies all my life because it's wrong. I hate to see it. I used to hate a head teacher who'd say to me, "You've got any bullying here?" Bollocks. Every institution, every organisation. You've been in the armed forces, looking right. The Home Secretary's just been accused of bullying, hasn't she? Priti Patel. She's been accused of bullying and stuff, whatever. And here I am being lectured by a government, and a government that's actually taking backhanders and taking, all kinds of deals on PPE and other stuff. And they're lecturing me and sending in an official, a Tory official, to come and have a look and tell us how to run Liverpool City Council, despite the massive cuts they've implemented on us.
Mate, do you think, and again, I'm conscious of time, you've been our first political kind of podcast and one of my favourites already. One thing to kind of bring it to a close, do you think you will ever restore your reputation in the city?
It's going to be a massive challenge, mate, it really is, but I think yes, the answer to that, because I believe passionately that, as I said before, with Hillsborough, with Michael Shield, with other things, that Liverpool people are slightly different than others in that, they believe in fairness. They believe in the right of people to be heard. They believe in natural justice. In other words, people should be given the opportunity to actually demonstrate, their side. And I think people will eventually, start to look at this and say, well, hang on, why wasn't that said in that report, or why wasn't that explained? Like for instance, this claim of this deliberate lie, where it says that I said only Liverpool companies with Liverpool postcode. Read the transcript, you'll see that's taken from a recording, and it's typed out by an audio typist who works in a solicitor's. So it's a legal document. And it does not say that. So why has he made that claim? Why has he lied? Why is this lie about throwing papers in the skip as if it was Liverpool City Council? All of those things, people will start to ask those questions. So, the answer for me, long-winded, but basically I hope that people read the website and start asking questions and say to people who claim that there's impropriety or wrongdoing or corruption going on, show me where it is. Show me, let's see, don't talk about it. Show me where it is. It's a serious claim that you're making. Let's see the evidence. And if people start asking that and people start seeing that, I'm convinced that the people of the city will treat it as what it is, and that's contemptible at this minute because of the failings to actually provide any hard-based facts.
Well, one thing on that then, just to definitely finish off, one question was, do you feel like you've let the city down? Now, going by your answer, I'm guessing you don't feel you do. So do you therefore feel let down by the city?
Yeah, I feel hurt. I feel hurt that people who have seen what's gone on in this city, have seen what we've done in this city, have seen me speak, passionately about my love for my city, feel that they can believe what other people are saying. So I feel hurt. Yeah, I feel let down. The point about whether I've let them down is, yes, I wish I've done things differently now, not necessarily in decisions that I've made, but about how, for instance, things weren't evidenced. I mean, it frustrates me that when Max Caller was based in the Cunard building, and that's where he was based, 85% of the staff in the Cunard building were working from home. So who did he see? And so when he talks about this skip incident with paperwork being dumped in the skip, it was 7 years ago. It's when we were in the other buildings, when we were in municipal buildings. So an officer of Liverpool City Council must have gone along to him and gone, "Hello, Mr. Caller, can I speak to you in a minute? Can I tell you about this?" Max Caller would know about Michelle and the skip and what happened. So who are the people that are providing him with the information? Who are the people that are providing him with the misinformation that he's now published? And an action's being taken, costly action, against Liverpool City Council, which we're going to have to pay for. So that's maybe a regret that I wasn't able to get the councillors to defend what we've established and done over the last 11 years. And I haven't been able to, in some senses, protect the city against the costs that we're going to have to incur when these people are sent in. So that's a regret that I wasn't able to stop that or be able to provide this information to him. And don't forget, Caller mentions me in his report 80 times. And yet he never asked me any questions. It was me that asked for the interview with him. Now, don't you find that wrong? So if any organisation is getting audited, because that's what it was, a best value audit, that the first thing you would do is speak to the organisation and the head of the organisation. Yeah. But no, he never. So when he talked about Amy and those facts that I gave you, couldn't he have just asked me the question? And I'd have said, well, we're saving 3 million, Max. We're also, we own that equipment. And he could have said, well, I'm not putting that in then. Or when he mentioned, he says that the organisation, which is Blackburn House, were not told that they would have to fit out that building. This was a deal with Elliot Lawless. And he says that they weren't told. And yet on my website, I provide evidence, a letter to them from the council that shows they were told. So why wasn't that corrected by a council officer who said, hang on, Max, that's wrong. Here's the evidence here. They were told. People have got to start asking the questions about why Liverpool City Council officers, senior officers of the councils, these statutory officers, have allowed this to happen. Because it's just blame Joe, isn't it? Everybody, they come out of this with, Jeanette McLaughlin, the city solicitor, has been at the council for 25, 30 years. Tony Reeves has been at the council for 3.5 years. Mel Crichton, the financial director, for about 3 years. So why aren't they getting asked questions? There's one part of the report, and sorry that we're going back over it when you're trying to finish up, but it's an important point to make here. In Max Caller's report, he says there's £7 million of unclaimed business rent. Do you recall that? If you read the report, it says there's £7 million of unclaimed business rent, and he said it's unlikely to be claimed now because of COVID. Well, I didn't know nothing about it. I knew nothing about the £7 million of unclaimed business rent. So you may say to me, you're the mayor, why didn't you know? Well, I didn't know because nobody told me. And if I'd have known that there was £7 million of unclaimed rent, what do you think I'd have done about it? I'd have said, get your arse in gear and get out and collect that rent. Get bailiffs out and collect that rent, or employ more staff to go and collect that rent. But I wasn't told. So who's responsible for that? So people of this city might lose that money, but 3 officers, statutory officers of the council, they're not getting any portion, any blame, but I'm getting scapegoated for it. It's not on, it's not fair, it's not balanced, and people will start to ask questions. The more information I put out there and tell people, then the more they'll know. Well, that's a serious question, isn't it? £7 million, we can't afford it as a city. We're being threatened with closure of services and things, yet there's £7 million. And Joe Anderson, the then Mayor of Liverpool, wasn't told by his financial director, wasn't told by his chief executive, or wasn't told by his city solicitor that there was £7 million of unclaimed rent.
Mate, there you go.
Yeah, thank you,
There you go.
Joe, for your time. Honestly, I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
With 2 hours 40 minutes.
It's not as long as the police interview.
Hopefully it was a lot less stressful as well. But no, again, I'd said it before.
Have you enjoyed it anyway?
No, seriously. But look, at the end of the day, as I said, I get to the stage in this where, you know, the taxi driver, you know, stuff and whatever. People can ask me what they want. I've got nothing to hide. You know, I've got nothing to hide. I'm more than happy for you to look at my bank account. More than happy to show you what I've got in it. I've just revealed information about my wife starting a cleaning job and stuff. That's the truth. You know, the point is that I've got nothing to hide. I've done nothing wrong, and I'll keep arguing that, and I'll keep you know, and hopefully maybe, you know, I'll come back and speak on your podcast when you know that is eminently clear to people that that's the case.
You're welcome back anytime, Joe. Yeah.
Joe, massive thanks on record. I massively enjoyed this. It's, again, you've given up your time to come and speak, give your side, and again, everyone check out joeanderson.co, fighting back. Massive thanks, Joe. Cheers.
Thank you, mate.
You're welcome.